Chapter 1262. I dote on you, so I can't just watch you marry a slut. Can you understand Annie's good intentions? Besides, this woman wants to use the child to blackmail you. Hee hee. Dream on. I'll put it this way. Mu Yichen's child will be acknowledged by the muse. However, we won't acknowledge Yun Shirshir's son. She can forget about bringing that little b asterisk st asterisk rd into the muse house. Little b asterisk st asterisk rd. Mu Yaja narrowed his eyes dangerously. Mu Shumin was startled. She was well aware that she had been too agitated, so much so that she had blurted out some words without thinking. She was extremely vexed for a moment, so she fiercely bit her red lips and stopped talking. Mu Linfeng glared at her angrily, too. She called Yun Tianyu a little b asterisk st asterisk road. Was she not insulting the Mu family? No matter how useless Yun Tianyu was, the blood of the Mu family still flowed in his veins. Mu Yaja smiled and retorted coldly, "What's wrong, Annie? I'm the one marrying her. It's not up to you to worry about my woman, is it?" "How is it not up to me to worry?" Mu Shumin's tone turned sharp when she saw the sarcasm in his words. Yaja, I think you're getting more and more. How dare you say such disgraceful words? Are you blind? You don't want a good woman, but you want a shady woman. You can afford to lose face, but the muse can't. It's fine if you don't do something stupid, but you implicate the rest of the family. They can't even raise their heads after you. Disheng's CEO is actually marrying a showbiz actress as his wife. Just thinking about it makes me blush. As Mu Shumin spoke, she sneered and said, "Moreover, why don't you think about your current status? Yes, you're the strongest candidate for the Mu family's head, but I hope you're clear that you're just a candidate and have yet to ascend to the position of the family head. Don't lose your position because of a woman. The loss outweighs the gain." "That's right, Yaja. Don't let your emotions get the better of you. You're being too impulsive." Mu Yaja raised his eyebrows slightly. "Don't tell me that since I'm the head of the family, I have the final say in this marriage? We'll talk about it when you become the patriarch." Mu Shumin sneered coldly. Out of the corner of his eye, he caught a glimpse of Mu Yaja's subtle movements. He clasped his hands together. His left index finger and thumb were rubbing something carefully. Mu Yaja opened his eyes, his aura intimidating. Mu Shumin suddenly widened his eyes and looked over. She suddenly noticed the ruby ring he wore on his right thumb. Inside the ruby ring is the Mu family's emblem, a dragon seal that pierced through the clouds and swallowed the heavens. That's the Mu family's family tattoo that has been passed down for generations. The possession of this ring means the possession of the Mu clan's supreme power. Only the head of the Mu Jia can have this ancient ring that has been passed down for hundreds of years. Mu Shumin's eyes suddenly widened. Mu Linfeng followed her astonished gaze and could not help but be shocked as well. When the crowd saw the ancient ring on his hand, their faces stiffened, and their eyes could not help but be filled with reverence. When did this happen? Mu Shumin could not even speak coherently. Mu Yaja did not even raise his eyebrows and remained silent. Chapter 1263. From today onwards, he would officially become the head of the Mu family. Mu Linfeng was also shocked, speechless. Mu Yaja's lips curled into a mocking smile. "As you can see, I'm now the head of the household and the most powerful person in the Mu family. I don't want to hear anyone say otherwise about who I'm marrying." Everyone fell into a strange silence. No one dared to speak. Although Mu Shumin could not suppress his anger, he did not know what to say. Mu Linfeng said gloomily, "Let me ask you again. Do you really want to marry that woman? Must you marry her?" "Second uncle, I've already made my stance clear. No matter how much you ask, it's useless. Mu Yaja raised his chin arrogantly. His attitude was arrogant and insufferably arrogant. Second brother, pay attention to your words. Is this the attitude you should have when speaking to your second uncle? How can marriage be a trifling matter? I'm also considering this from your perspective. It's fine if you don't appreciate my kindness, but you're still acting so overbearing. Mu Yenqing spoke up from the side. Mu Yaja swept a cold glance over. His eyes were sharp and contained a sharp warning. You have no right to criticize my decisions. Who are you to talk to me like that? Mu Yenqing immediately shut his mouth. His face alternated between green and white in embarrassment. As a side branch, it was indeed inappropriate for him to butt in. Although he was only a year younger than Mu Yaja, there was a huge disparity in their status. He was jealous, but more than that, he was unconvinced. Mu Yenqing was also young and impetuous. In his heart, he was not much worse than Mu Yaja. He just lacked the opportunity and status. In terms of ability, he boasted that he was extraordinary. Therefore, when he was pressured by Mu Yaja, he felt indignant. What right did he have to be so arrogant and overbearing? Was it just because he was the head of the Mu family now? Did he think that he was so great because he was the head of the household? Just because he's the Mu Jia's patriarch, he can overestimate himself and challenge the authority of the Mu Jia's rules? What are you being so arrogant for? I wonder how long you'll be able to sit on the patriarch's seat. Mu Yenqing cursed fiercely in his heart. He was extremely unwilling, but he could only force a smile on his face. Do you have any objections to this marriage? Mu Yaja asked. Mu Shumin's face was full of anger as he said in a sarcastic tone, Hee, you're the patriarch now. So, of course you have the final say? I just feel that your second uncle really made a mistake back then. Why did he support you? Now that you're in power, you're going to drag the entire clan down with you. Mu Yaja's cold gaze swept over and landed on Mu Shumin's body. The hidden sharpness in his gaze was enough to stab her. Mu Shumin was immediately enraged by his stare. Why are you glaring at me? You don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Do you really think that you can do whatever you want just because you're the patriarch? No matter what, I'm still your aunt. Don't be too self-righteous. Humph, I hope that's the last time you say those words just now. Don't let me hear them again. Are you threatening me? Mu Shumin stood up agitatedly. Shumin, stop talking. Just let him go. He'll regret it sooner or later. Mu Linfeng said angrily. Chapter 12:64. Sometimes he lamented the fact that he had so many family members despite the size of the Mu family. The same blood flowed in their bodies as he did. And yet, sometimes these people might be your family, but they didn't seem like family at all. Everyone here seemed concerned on the surface, but in reality, they couldn't wait to find a suitable opportunity to force him to abdicate. In a family where fame and fortune were the most important things, there was no need to talk about kinship, since they didn't give him any face. It was ridiculous to expect him to care about kinship. Mu Yaja said coldly, Second uncle, I've never regretted my decisions. I thought you knew me well enough. Mu Linfeng scoffed. He was clearly so angry that he could not speak. Mu Shumin said from the side, Then what about the upcoming board meeting? Are you really going to transfer your shares to your fourth uncle? As long as second uncle promises me one thing, I'll cancel the shareholders' meeting. What is it? Mu Yaja's voice deepened. Keep your subordinates in check. Since when can an outsider order the people in the capital military district around as he pleases? Mu Linfeng's heart skipped a beat as he exchanged glances with his nephew. He understood that his nephew had seen through his intentions. Immediately, he sneered and nodded. Good. I promise you. Then I still have something to do, so I'll take my leave first, cancel the shareholders' meeting, and I'll leave fourth uncle's matter to you, second uncle. I don't want things to escalate to the point where I have to resort to my own means to deal with it. Muyaja stood up and walked to the door. Suddenly, he stopped and turned around slowly. However, I still have something to warn you all. He turned around and swept his gaze across the crowd as he enunciated each and every word clearly. If anyone dares to lay a finger on them under my nose, don't blame me for being rude. With that, he strode away without looking back. After the door was slammed shut, Mu Shumin was so angry that he trembled all over. He stood up agitatedly and pointed in the direction Muyaja left, his face red with anger. Mu Linfeng sat at the side in silence. Muyaja, on the other hand, had thoroughly disappointed him. This brat, it seems that after becoming the Mujia's patriarch, he doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. His wings have hardened, and he has the ability to fly. A few senior people sat at the side with cold faces, causing the temperature in the huge office to drop to the extreme in an instant. Mu Yenqing was so angry that his face turned white. After being humiliated by Muyaja just now, it was hard for him to vent his anger. He turned to accuse Mu Linfeng. Second uncle, I don't mean to say anything bad about him, but this brat is too disrespectful. That's right. Yaja's performance today was truly chilling. Previously, because second brother had promoted him, I had always thought highly of him. Why is it that now her temperament is quite unreasonable? This woman is really a scourge if we leave her alive. Second uncle, look, some time ago, he actually went to the Song family to seek revenge for this woman. Now that the Song family is here to complain, where is the Mu family's face? Sigh, that woman really has some tricks up her sleeves. I don't know what she's capable of, but she's actually leading him by the nose. What a scourge. Chapter 1265. What should we do now? Don't tell me we're really going to let Yaja marry that woman. That's one more thing to do. The Mu family has always been in favor of marriage between families of equal social status. That woman isn't of equal social status, and she's not even chaste. Is she even worthy? Mu Shumin snorted at his uncle. Second brother, what do you say? Are you really going to watch him fool around and not do anything about it? What can I do? I've already said and tried to stop him, but he just won't listen. What's the use of that? I admit that Yaja has been in the Mu group for so many years, and he has indeed contributed a lot to the company's development. However, that doesn't mean that he can do whatever he wants just because he has achieved so much. Mu Linfeng muttered, that lad's achievements are immeasurable, and I'm very satisfied with him. For him to be able to sit on the patriarch's seat, he deserved it. The only thing that displeases me is that he's too stubborn, just like his father. I've always thought that he's a cold person who knows his limits in everything he does. I just didn't expect him to lose his sense of direction after falling in love. That woman seems to be someone who can't be underestimated. To be able to charm that lad to such an extent. He, Mu Linfeng sneered. Young man, it's not good to be too arrogant. You'll eventually lose out in the vanity field. Yaja is arrogant by nature. He's a little too arrogant. Mu Linfeng interrupted these people's condemnation. However, that lad's capability is obvious to all. Who doesn't make mistakes in their life? Who can pat their chest and say that they've never made a mistake in their life? Forget it. Forget it. Mu Shumin was a little agitated. Second brother, what do you mean by forget it? Are you really not going to do anything about this? Now's not the time. Yun, sure, that woman must not be left alive. I'll deal with her sooner or later, but now's not the time. What do you mean? Everyone was confused. Mu Linfeng said, casually, since he insists on marrying her, we can only smooth things over. After a while, I'll arrange a clean identity for her, so that people won't laugh at the Mu family. This was the only thing he could do. Mu Shumin was so angry that his blood boiled. Clearly, he could not accept Mu Linfeng's decision. I don't agree. Shumin, listen to me. Mu Linfeng's tone was unyielding. Mu Shumin had no choice but to swallow his protest and remain silent. Mu Yenching said from the side, "Humph, second uncle, sometimes you're really biased. How is second brother better than me? If you had supported me in the past, I would have obeyed your orders no matter how big or small, like an imperial edict. I wouldn't have disobeyed you in the slightest. Look at him now. He's actually giving you face. How infuriating." Anger flashed across Mu Linfeng's face as he coldly rebuked. "How dare you? It's not up to you to judge what I do. You still have the cheek to say that. Since you were young, second uncle has never mistreated you. What did you do, though? You keep saying that you're not inferior to him in any way. What about the reality? The difference between you and Yaja isn't just a little bit. Yaja is more capable and outstanding than you. If you were half as capable as him, you wouldn't be like this now. Humph, isn't it because he's the legitimate son, and I'm a concubine's son?" Mu Yenching grumbled, feeling wronged. Chapter 1266. Yaja is still young. Sometimes he doesn't know any better and will inevitably take the wrong path. I'll try to persuade him when the time comes. If it really doesn't work, we'll come up with another plan. Shu Min, what you said today was too extreme. It won't do you any good to anger him. He paused for a moment before saying with a frown, "I know what he's capable of doing. That's why you should know your limits when you speak to him in the future." "Got it. Second brother." Mu Shumin reluctantly agreed. After that, Mu Linfeng made a call to the military. Mu Lianjue's men were all deployed from the military. In other words, his every move was under his nose. He was aware of this matter, but he did not do anything because, as Mu Yaja had expected, he wanted to use his brother to get rid of Yun Shirshir, who was in his way. Unexpectedly, Mu Yaja's attitude toward this was unexpectedly firm. He had no choice but to stop. With a call from him, the people in the military immediately obeyed the imperial edict and withdrew all their men. When Mu Lianjue learned of this matter, he knew that the situation was hopeless, but he was indignant. Hence, while the men in the military district were sent back, the assassins he had sent out were still on their way. He had no intention of calling them back. Mu Yaja had caused him to suffer greatly, so he had to give him a taste of his own medicine. The sky gradually darkened. You sat on the mountaintop, bored to death. Zhao Linghua was still chattering in his ear, but he chose to automatically block her. She did not seem to have any intention of stopping. You finally could not hold it in any longer. Aren't you tired? What? Aren't you tired of talking all the time? She stuck her tongue out and smiled. Now that you mention it, I'm a little thirsty. Thus, she pulled his hand. Let's go. I'll bring you to quench your thirst. Yu was reluctant, but she was too strong for him to do so. She jogged happily with him and came to a mountain pass. Walking down a long flight of stone steps, Yu suddenly saw a jade-green color. His curiosity was piqued. He raised his head and looked around. At the foot of the mountain, there was a green mountain spring. It was a natural spring. At a glance, it was green and clear, so clear that the bottom could be seen. Let me tell you a secret. The spring water here is called Holy Mother Spring. The spring water is very, very sweet. You can drink it directly. Every household in the village drinks the water from here. You was surprised. You can drink it directly? He couldn't be blamed for feeling strange. Nowadays, in the city, the pollution was getting worse day by day. Not to mention the spring water. Even the small rivers were horribly polluted, and the stench was overwhelming. Although the government had spent a lot of money to clean up the environment, there were no results. The smog was getting heavier and heavier. The river water was also getting more and more turbid in his entire life. This was the first time he had seen a spring that was so clear and green. Lingling walked to the side of the spring, scooped up a handful of spring water, leaned her face in, and drank a big mouthful. When Yu saw this, he imitated her and scooped up a handful of water to taste. It was indeed sweet. Isn't it very sweet? Lingling asked triumphantly. Yu nodded and drank a few more mouthfuls. Apart from the sweetness, the spring water slid down his throat. That taste was very satisfying. Chapter 12:67. Let's go. It's getting late. Let's go back for dinner. You could not help sighing inwardly. Time was passing so slowly. He wished that tomorrow would arrive sooner, so that he could contact his family and return home as soon as possible. It would be great if he could grow a pair of wings. He could then fly back to his mommy's side. As he lamented, Yu and Lingling returned to the Zhao family's house. Dinner was ready. Yu glanced at the table. The dishes were simple and plain, but they were all homegrown vegetables and rice. Sometimes he envied such a peaceful and simple life. Yu lamented again. After thanking Zhao Xiangjuan and Li Ru, he picked up his bowl. His eating posture was so elegant that it was truly astounding. Li Ru could not help praising. June, look, the children in the city are indeed different. Look at his eating posture. He's just like a young master, so elegant and polite. With that, she did not forget to admonish Lingling and Daodu. Look at you too. You should learn more from him. Lingling stuck out her tongue indignantly and buried her head in eating. After finishing his meal, Yu put down his bowl and chopsticks and thanked them again. Thank you, Uncle and Auntie, for preparing such a delicious dinner for me. I'll remember your kindness when I get home. Hey, child, why are you being so polite? Li Ru's heart was filled with sweetness when she heard this. Tianyu was serious about this, though. His mommy had taught him since he was young that he should remember the kindness of a drop of water. When he got home, he would think of a way to repay this family handsomely. At night, there were only a few small rooms in the Zhao family's house. Usually, Daodu and Lingling slept on the same bed. Now that Yu was here, they could only suffer and squeeze together with the three children. Yu was not used to beds. The Zhao family's bed was especially hard, so he did not sleep well. He tossed and turned in bed, and only fell asleep in the middle of the night. In the middle of the night, Yu was half awake when he suddenly heard a commotion outside the door. Yu was awakened by the noise and saw Li Ru running in with her hair disheveled. Without saying anything, she picked up one child in each hand and woke Lingling up. She lowered her voice and said, "Lingling, wake up, come with me." Lingling had a confused look on her face. She was half awake, but she subconsciously listened to Li Ru and ran behind her. Li Ru carried Yu and Daodu in each of her arms while Lingling followed behind her. She ran up the mountain with the three children in tow. What happened? Lingling followed behind Li Ru, panting heavily. She rubbed her sleepy eyes with one hand, obviously confused. Just now, in the middle of the night, she suddenly heard the courtyard door outside her house being kicked open. She immediately got up from the bed and rushed to the door with Zhao Xiangjuan, only to see a few men in black walking in. Their first words were, "Where's the child?" Child? Li Ru did not understand. What child? Who are you? Don't play dumb. Hand over the child, you saved today." They followed the trail all the way here. Just as they arrived at the village, they heard that this family had saved a child from the mountains. The child was about 7 or 8 years old and was covered in blood. They were certain that this child was the one they were looking for. Zhao Xiangjuan immediately realized that these people did not come with good intentions, so he quickly ordered Li Ru to take the child and escape from the back door, leaving him alone to deal with them. Chapter 1268. Zhao Xiangjuan immediately realized that these people were not friendly, so he hurriedly instructed his wife to run from the back door with the children, leaving him alone to hold them off. The woman, who was flustered, did as she was told. She ran to the room with her hair disheveled. Carrying Yu Yu in one hand and Daodu in the other, she woke Lingling up and ran out from the back door with the 3 children. There was a very secluded mountain path at the back door of the Zhao residence, which led up the stairs. At this time, it was dark and windy. The night wind in the mountain forest was especially strong. It whistled like a knife, stinging one's cheeks. Li Ru ran in a panic, not knowing how far she had run, with the children in her arms. As a farmer's woman, she had amazing physical strength because she had been doing farm work since young. Yu Yu and Daodu were very thin, so they did not weigh much in her arms. Lingling, on the other hand, was still young. After running a few miles on the mountain path behind her, she staggered and became a little unsteady. "Amma, what's wrong? What happened?" Lingling shouted in panic as she ran behind her. Even if her heels were sore, she did not stop running. Yu Yu remained silent throughout the journey. He lay on his mother's shoulder and looked in the direction of the Zhao residence from time to time. Suddenly, an ominous premonition arose in his heart. Could it be that Mu Lianjue's men had caught up with them? First, he felt vaguely uneasy. His small hands clenched tightly into fists, and his palms were wet with sweat. Li Ru led them to a secluded temple on the mountain. This temple was old and cold. It had been abandoned for a long time, and no one had taken care of it. Usually, many children would occasionally come to this temple to play. Other than that, there were few people in this area. Li Ru hid in a small house with the children. She put them down, turned around, closed the door, and locked it. Then she looked outside through the broken window from time to time. You looked around. Under the white moonlight outside the window, he could see the dust flying in the air. Perhaps it had been abandoned for too long, for the corners of the room were full of cobwebs. The table was crooked and had fallen to the side, missing an arm or a leg. A musty smell wafted over. The room was cold and damp. Ling, who was barefooted, was shivering from the cold. She walked behind Li Ru and gently tugged at her clothes. "Ma, it's so dark here. I'm scared." "Shh, don't make a sound." Li Ru reprimanded him sternly and then looked outside the house vigilantly. Yu Yu curled up in a corner, her mind racing. He didn't know what had happened, but when he was half awake, he vaguely heard a gunshot and a fierce kick on the door. Then Li Ru ran in with her hair disheveled. Without saying a word, she carried him and Lil P and ran to the back room. He guessed that something must have happened. Yu Yu pursed her lips and looked up at Li Ru, only to see that she was still in shock. Her chest was heaving up and down violently, and her eyes were filled with fear. He walked over and placed his little hand gently on her shoulder. This small action seemed to have given her a dose of reassurance. Only then did Li Ru's emotions ease up a little. "Auntie, what happened?" Chapter 1269. In an instant, all her fears collapsed. She burst into tears. "I don't know either. I really don't know what happened. Your uncle told me to bring you guys away first, so I didn't think much about it." She then gave him a rough account of the situation. Upon hearing this, Yu Yu guessed that the assassins sent by Mu Lianjue had caught up with them. Auntie, why didn't you tell me earlier? Yu looked at her with a complicated gaze. Their target is me. There's no need to implicate you guys. In his heart, he felt grateful and guilty toward Zhao Xiangjuan. Those people wanted them to hand over the child, so Yu was certain that they were here for him. In fact, as long as Zhao Xiangjuan handed him over, they would not be implicated. Yu did not want to implicate the innocent, nor did he want to sacrifice unrelated people. Hence, he stood up and walked toward the door. Li Ru pulled him back. Where are you going? Those people are here for me. Yu replied in a low voice. If I go back now, Uncle will be safe. Otherwise, I'm afraid that something will happen to him. No, it's too dangerous for you to go back. They all had guns in their hands now. It's too dangerous. Li Ru insisted on not going back. She was not cultured, but her nature was simple and honest. She was very kind. She could not watch such a young child put himself in danger. Don't worry. Your uncle will be fine. He'll be fine. Li Ru kept repeating these words as if she was hypnotizing herself. She kept consoling herself. Yu felt especially upset. In his heart, he only hoped that Zhao Xiangjuan would be safe and sound. Lingling and Lil Pi were huddled together, helplessly shivering from the cold. She had no idea what was going on, and her eyes were filled with fear. Lil Pi, on the other hand, was also panicking. She snuggled tightly in Lingling's arms and widened her eyes pitifully. There was only confusion and fear in her eyes. Li Ru hugged Yu tightly in her arms. She felt extremely uneasy and tormented all the time. Time passed second by second, and it felt like a century. The sky gradually brightened, and it was dawn. Suddenly, shouts could be heard from the mountain. Aru! Aru! Doubta's mother! Hearing this, Li Ru was startled. However, she could vaguely tell that one of the voices belonged to her sister-in-law. She immediately opened the door. Qinfen? Li Ru called out. A series of messy footsteps ran in her direction. Soon, a group of villagers rushed into the temple. Seeing that it was Li Ru, her sister-in-law rushed over with tears streaming down her face, wailing loudly, Li Ru, hurry back and take a look. My father, my father. Hearing this, Li Ru became nervous. What happened to his father? The woman slapped her thigh, with tears in her eyes. Suddenly, she saw Yun Tianyu behind Li Ru. She rushed over and pushed his shoulder. Yun Tianyu was suddenly pushed to the ground. When his back hit the ground, it affected his wound. He involuntarily sucked in a breath of cold air from the pain and opened his eyes abruptly. Lingling was shocked. She hurried forward and helped Yu up. Li Ru was stunned and shouted, Qinfen, what are you doing? Why did you push this doll? Chapter 1270. What do you mean by that? She panicked. What's going on? What's wrong with my son's father? Tell me quickly. Qinfen hurriedly said, My son's dying. You'd better go back and take a look. Ah, she screamed and immediately ran in the direction of the house. Yu and Lingling looked at each other before the three children followed closely behind. She ran all the way down the mountain and rushed into the courtyard. Seeing 5 fully armed men, she was stunned at first. Her heart skipped a beat, and she took a step back. However, when she calmed herself down and sized up the men standing in front of her, she realized that they were not the men in black who had broken into the house in the middle of the night. Li Ru looked around with trepidation, only to find that there were a few cold corpses lying at the feet of these people. Her eyes widened in fright, and she subconsciously screamed. Ah! For so many years, Anyang village had been a peaceful place with simple folk customs. Everyone was united and friendly, and no one had ever died here. Hence, this was the first time she had seen such a tragic scene. She took a closer look and saw that these corpses belonged to none other than the men in black who had broken into the house in the middle of the night with guns in their hands. The thick and pungent smell of blood assaulted her nostrils. Li Ru was frightened and took a few steps back. At the same time, she became vigilant and looked at the men in front of her warily. Who are you?" The mercenaries turned around and glanced at her before asking coldly, "Where's the child?" She was even more alarmed when she heard that. "Who are you?" Yu and Lingling arrived just as she finished speaking. She anxiously stepped forward and shielded him behind her. When the mercenaries saw Yun Tianyu, the leader of the group took out a photo from his breast pocket. After carefully comparing the photo, he walked toward him. Li Ru became more alert. Qinfen stomped her feet in anger. "Ah, Ru, why are you still helping this scourge at this point? Hand the child over to them." "No, the child is innocent. We can't hand him over to them." She insisted stubbornly. Yu furrowed his brows and glanced at the mercenaries. When he saw the Hurricane Group logo on their armbands, his brows relaxed and he slowly pushed her away. She was shocked and reached out to pull him back, but Yu placed his hand on the back of hers. "Don't worry, Auntie." With that, he turned around and calmly walked toward the mercenaries. Just when everyone thought that these mercenaries would take the children away in a rough manner, the moment they saw Yun Tianyu standing in front of them, the burly men immediately got down on one knee. "Director Yun, we're here to receive you." After they finished speaking, they all lowered their heads and a respectful expression appeared on their cold faces. This scene caused everyone to be shocked. Did they hear it? These men actually addressed a 7- or 8-year-old child. In their impression, this was a name on Yun. Everyone was baffled and found it hard to digest this fact. Yu glanced at them and asked in a low voice, "What exactly happened?" Chapter 1271. It turned out that, as Vermilion Bird's subordinates, they were sent as the vanguard to search for his whereabouts. They followed his trail all the way here, but they did not expect to be beaten to it by Mu Lianjue's assassins. By the time they arrived, Mu Lianjue's men had already shot and injured Zhao Xiangjuan. The two sides met and exchanged gunfire. Vermilion Bird's vanguard was of superior quality and killed Mu Lianjue's men in less than 10 seconds. At this time, Zhao Xiangjuan was already on the verge of death. He only had one last breath left. They observed for a while and found that the man's thigh was hit by a bullet, but it was not fatal. What was fatal was the bullet that hit his lung. They had experienced too many casualties in their lives. After checking his injury and performing emergency treatment, they found that the bullet had penetrated the man's lung artery. Generally speaking, a bullet in the lung was the cruelest. A person would suffer massive bleeding from a bullet in the lung, resulting in pneumothorax. They would fall into a coma or even go into shock due to breathing difficulties. 2 to 3 hours later, they would die from respiratory failure due to the massive bleeding in the lung. There was no hope. This place was so backward that there was no way to treat such a wound. You asked, "Where is he?" "Where is he?" "In the house." As soon as she said that, she ran into the house like a madwoman. However, just as she stepped into the house, she vaguely heard a man's heavy breathing coming from the room. Lingling followed behind her. The mother-daughter pair rushed into the room, only to be stunned when they saw Zhao Xiangjuan lying on the bed and convulsing all over. They were stunned for a few seconds. Then, she let out a sorrowful scream. Her legs went weak as she stumbled to the bedside. Jun, what's wrong with you?" "Father!" Lingling pounced on him as well. She held the man's face in her hands, only to see that his eyes were rolled back and blood was foaming at the corner of his mouth, while his breathing was rapid. He seemed to be dying. This realization was undoubtedly the end of the world for her. She felt as if she was about to be drowned out by an overwhelming fear. It was as if the sky was about to collapse. Zhao Linghua didn't know what had happened. She didn't know why Zhao Xiangjuan was injured, but seeing him constantly coughing up blood, she knew that this was a bad sign. She was so scared that she opened her mouth and began to cry. "Father! Father, what's wrong with you? Father!" Amid Lingling's sorrowful cries, Li Ru's body swayed. She almost blacked out and fainted. She held on to the bed, still unable to calm her emotions. She did not know any medical knowledge, but looking at Zhao Xiangjuan's condition, she knew that it was over. He could not be saved. Li Ru's heart was filled with grief. She threw herself onto Zhao Xiangjuan and burst into tears. Li Ru and Zhao Xiangjuan had always been very loving. The two of them were introduced to each other by their families. Li Ru admired Zhao Xiangjuan's honesty, and Zhao Xiangjuan loved her very much. She had also imagined countless scenes of life and death, but she never thought that one day she would lose him under such circumstances. The most painful thing in the world is the separation of life and death. Chapter 1272. Yu Yu and Lil Pi rushed into the house and smelled the pungent smell of blood. He walked to the bed and saw the blood on the man's lips. He was stunned. Li Ru was on the verge of breaking down. She hugged Zhao Xiangjuan's shoulders tightly and cried. Lil Pi surrounded Zhao Xiangjuan, and their eyes were red. Yu Yu, who was standing at the side, could not bear it and instantly felt extremely guilty. Daoda glanced at him all of a sudden. He took a step forward, clenched his fists, and punched Yu Yu's body. "Give me back my father. Give him back to me. Give him back to me." Lil Pi cried and punched him. He was so weak that it was pathetic. Yu Yu did not dodge. He was also very sad. Even he did not expect this to happen. "How did this happen?" Yu mumbled in confusion. "It's all your fault. It's all your fault." Lil Pi collapsed on the ground and wailed. He rubbed his eyes, and his face was wet with tears. Li Ru and Lil Pi were also in tears. Red Sparrow received news that the man had been found. She immediately rushed over with her men after receiving the coordinates. It was already dawn. When Red Sparrow arrived, she saw that the Zhao family had already started to prepare for the funeral. People were coming in and out. Li Ru had to pull herself together and start to prepare for the funeral. Zhao Xiangjuan had already passed away. Yu Yu sat at the door with a gloomy face. Red Sparrow raised her hand and gestured for her men to wait for her orders. She walked to Yu Yu and squatted down. "President Yun, I'm sorry I'm late." Yu Yu's eyes were gloomy as he lowered his head without saying a word. The vermilion bird was slightly startled. She could not help but reach out and gently place her hand on his shoulder. Yu Yu suddenly raised his hand and held her hand tightly. President Yun, Red Sparrow was stunned and looked at him in surprise. "Colonel Vermilion Bird, where have you been?" Yu Yu gripped her fingers tightly and looked up with a cold expression. Her clear eyes showed no emotion. There was only coldness. Why can Mu Lianjue's men chase us here, but you can't?" Yu Yu's voice was cold. He looked at her angrily and reprimanded. "Tell me the reason." The vermilion bird was stunned. Although this child was young, the aura he exuded was extremely oppressive and domineering. She was slightly shocked. "Are you really going to give your all in this operation?" Yu Yu said coldly, "Don't tell me, Colonel Suzaku, you're worse than those people? I'm very disappointed in you." "I'm sorry, President Yun. This time, it's my fault." Vermilion Bird lowered her head in guilt. Yu Yu said mercilessly, "Reflect on yourself when you get back." Red Sparrow said firmly, "Yes." She carefully observed his expression and asked in a low voice, "President Yun, I'll bring you back now." No. Yu replied. Yu sighed. I'll go back after attending the funeral, she replied. Okay. The news reached the Mu family. Mu Yaja was relieved to know that they had found Yun Tianyou's whereabouts. He heard that the child was safe and only slightly injured. He would be staying there to recuperate for a few days. Once he recovered, Vermilion Bird and the rest would escort him back. Gong Jia had sent more men, and Luca and Njia were on their way. Chapter 1273. When Mu Yaja arrived, with Yun Shirshir, Xiao Yichen was lying on the bed. His face was pale and lifeless. The moment he woke up, he made a fuss about getting out of bed. It was only when he received news that Yu's whereabouts had been found that he felt at ease. He obediently lay back on the bed and drank some porridge. The doctor said that the wounds on his body were only superficial and did not affect his muscles or bones. It was just that the wounds were infected and were not treated in time. As a result, they became inflamed and caused a high fever. Fortunately, Xiao Yichen's physical fitness was strong. After a night of rest, his fever quickly subsided. As for the reason why he fainted, it was because he had exhausted too much of his energy. He only recovered some of his vitality after taking a few bottles of nutrient fluids. The doctor could not help but marvel at this child's good physique. Yun Shirshir walked into the ward and slowly walked to his bedside. She lowered her head and carefully sized up Mu Yichen's pale face. Mu Yichen heard movement and slowly opened his eyes. When he saw Yun Shirshir, his cracked lips moved and 2 words escaped from his mouth. Mommy, his eyes instantly reddened. When the mother and son met again, it felt like a lifetime had passed. They had been apart for a few days, but it felt like a century had passed. Yichen. Yun Shirshir gently hugged his shoulders with reddened eyes. She did not dare to use too much strength for fear of hurting his wounds. When she thought of how he had suffered so much because of her, her heart ached even more. She was so sad that tears fell from her eyes. I'm sorry, Yichen. I'm sorry. Xiao Yichen tried his best to open his eyes wider. He lifted his heavy hands and hugged her shoulders. Mommy, I'm back. Yun Shirshir hugged him a little tighter and choked out, Xiao Yichen, Mommy missed you so much. Little Yichen's expression changed a little as his eyes reddened all of a sudden. He could not hold back the tears that he had been desperately trying to hold back, and they gushed out of his eyes. He hugged her even tighter and rested his head on her neck. He said sadly, Mommy, Xiao Yichen missed you too. Mu Yaja slowly walked to the bedside and sat on his side. He wrapped his long arms around the mother and son and pulled them into his embrace. The 3 of them hugged each other tightly. For the first time in his life, Mu Yichen had the urge to cry. He had never felt this way before. The warmth that was injected into his heart flowed along with his blood, causing his originally cold limbs to gradually warm up. Xiao Yichen suddenly raised his head and smiled at Mu Yaja. Daddy, Xiao Yichen listened to me and protected Mommy and little brother well. Mu Yaja looked at the little fellow with a complicated expression. He looked at his pale face. He did not know what the 2 children had gone through along the way. Even Xiao Yichen, who had always been strong, was exhausted. For a moment, he had mixed feelings. Relief, pity, guilt, and self-blame, all of them welled up. Looking at Xiao Yichen's proud little face, Mu Yaja could not help but laugh. This little fellow, he did not disappoint him. At such a young age, he already had such great responsibilities. Therefore, he was not stingy with his praise. Xiao Yichen, you did well. When Xiao Yichen heard this, he could not help but smile in surprise, revealing his neat, snow-white teeth. Chapter 1274. Daddy rarely praised him. No matter what he did, he rarely received Daddy's approval and praise. This was just a few pieces, but it was undoubtedly the highest praise for him. Xiao Chen was greatly encouraged. What do you think? Mu Yaja's eyes flashed with a smile, but his gaze was full of admiration and approval. Mu Yichen's face couldn't help but turn slightly red. To him, Mu Yaja's praise was the highest praise for him. In his heart, he felt a little bit of a sense of accomplishment because he received Mu Yaja's approval. Daddy, this is what I should be doing. Protecting Mommy is also my responsibility, isn't it? He licked his dry lips and suddenly smiled as he said that. Mu Yaja couldn't help but reach out and ruffle his hair lovingly. The warmth from his palm was so real. Mu Yichen was extremely greedy for this warmth and closed his eyes contentedly. Daddy, Mommy, when are we going to bring little brother home? Yun Shirshir gently rubbed his little hand and gently coaxed, when you're better, we'll bring you home together, okay? Mu Yichen immediately said, I'm already better. There's no problem. I can get out of bed and walk around. Yun Shirshir didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She reached out and scratched his upturned nose bridge with her finger. She rebuked, little idiot, you're so badly injured. You should rest in bed for a few more days, okay? Mommy will accompany you. Mu Yichen was a little happy. When he heard that Yun Shirshir wanted to accompany him, his face couldn't help but turn red. He was a little shy. At the same time, it was a dreamlike surprise. Growing up, he didn't lack for anything. Basically, no matter what he wanted, he could have it all with just a word. As the future successor of the Mu family, he was born with a golden spoon in his mouth. Since then, he had been doted on by everyone. Everyone in the Mu family revolved around him. Naturally, he didn't lack anything. If he had to say what he lacked, the only thing he lacked was companionship. Sometimes he really envied children of the same age who could have so much companionship. When he first entered kindergarten, Mu Yichen had to admit how jealous he was when he saw the children running towards their parents who had been waiting outside the school for a long time and throwing themselves into their arms. Every time this happened, he would imagine when he would be able to see his daddy and Mommy standing together at the school gate, patiently waiting for him. But every time, he was greeted by a cold car. What he wanted was the company of his parents. For ordinary children, the company of their parents was often very simple and easy to obtain. However, for someone of his status, this request seemed so extravagant that he could only look forward to it. In fact, every time he received those expensive gifts, he wanted to throw them on the ground and tell his daddy, "This is not what I want. What I want is for you to accompany me. Even if it's just a little bit of time, every day." His biggest wish was that his daddy could spend more time with him, every day, just a little bit more. Although this thought was a little greedy, it was his most sincere wish. However, it was different now. He had a mommy. Mommy would accompany him and patiently care for him by his bedside. She would peel fruits for him, cut them into small pieces, and patiently feed them to him. Chapter 1275. A child's world was so simple. What they wanted was usually very simple. At the thought that his mommy would be by his side for the next few days, Mu Yichen's heart leaped with joy. He even felt that it was quite worth it to get such treatment in exchange for all his injuries. When he thought about how he had gotten injured in the past during the special training camp and how he had pulled through in the end, he really felt a little pitiful when he thought about it. Sometimes this daddy of his was really lousy. Mommy is still the best. As he thought about this, he couldn't help but put his thoughts on his face as he snuggled up in Yun Shirshir's arms. At the same time, from the corner of his eye, he lightly glared at Mu Yaja, as if to say in disdain, "Mommy still loves me the most." After saying this, he didn't forget to stick out his tongue at Mu Yaja provocatively. Yun Shirshir didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but she couldn't help pinching his cheeks. This kid had only been with Yu for a short period of time, but he had also become so clever. In the past, no matter what, he would never have said such a thing. Mu Yichen beamed with joy and hugged Yun Shishir tightly, completely ignoring Mu Yaja. Mu Yaja felt that he had been left out. This kid, Mu Yaja chided in his heart, but in the end, from the bottom of his eyes, there was a rare doting and playful look that was rarely seen. The most bland happiness was nothing more than this. He thought in his heart. Mu Yichen suddenly thought of something, and his good-looking brows suddenly raised slightly. He lifted his little face and whispered into Yun Shishir's ear, "Mommy, when are you going to give birth to a younger sister for me?" When these words entered Yun Shishir's ears, her face immediately flushed red. She pursed her lips, obviously a little shy. Mu Yichen's question had really caught her off guard, and she was completely unprepared. Mu Yaja didn't hear what Mu Yichen whispered into Yun Shishir's ear. He only saw her face change, as if she was a little embarrassed. Yun Shishir rebuked and poked Mu Yichen's head. She laughed and said, "What are you thinking about all day long?" "Mommy, are you shy?" Mu Yichen looked at her, black and white eyes, bright, shining with a naughty luster. Yun Shishir blushed when she heard this. Mu Yaja glanced at him and couldn't help but ask, "What were you whispering about?" Before Mu Yichen could say anything, Yun Shishir immediately said, "Don't tell him." Mu Yaja's eyes narrowed dangerously as he swept his gaze over Yun Shishir and Xiao Yichen. In reality, Mu Yichen had always wanted a younger sister. He had even fantasized that if he had an adorable younger sister, he would definitely dote on her to the core and give her a lot of love. He would treat her like a little princess in the palm of his hand and make her happy and blissful. Perhaps this had something to do with his personality. Xiao Yichen had been instilled with strict teachings since he was young. This made him extraordinarily responsible at a young age. He liked to take care of the weak. He wanted a younger sister because he had seen a pair of siblings outside an ice cream shop. The older brother was very tall, about 8 meters tall, while the younger sister was as small as a bean, riding on the older brother's shoulder. Chapter 1276. However, it wasn't difficult for him to see her dependence on her brother. Her brother had been carefully protecting her from the start. The doting and gentle look in his eyes made the entire scene seem very loving. He was extremely envious. He really wanted to have a younger sister like her. Then he could also dote on her, protect her, and accompany her as she grew up. This was Xiao Yichen's ultimate dream. He thought that if he had a younger sister, he would definitely be a successful and responsible older brother. As he thought about this, the hope in his heart burned even more. He looked at Yun Shishir with great expectations. It was as if he was saying, "Mommy, give birth to a younger sister. I want a younger sister." For a moment, Yun Shishir felt embarrassed and helpless. She didn't know how to answer the child's question. Mu Yaja looked at her face and couldn't help but lean closer to her. He whispered into her ear with a devilish expression. "What did he just say?" I didn't hear him," she mumbled softly. However, she was going to play dumb until the end. Mu Yaja narrowed his eyes. This woman was obviously brushing him off. He couldn't help but feel displeased. When Xiao Yichen couldn't see him, his large palm gently patted her buttocks. There was a hint of danger in his voice as he said, "Speak." Yun Shishir was so angry that she was at a loss for words. How could this man be so vile? Was he trying to take liberties with her in front of the child? Xiao Yichen didn't see Mu Yaja's little movements. However, he caught the hint of anger in Yun Shishir's eyes when she looked at Mu Yaja. He said angrily, "Daddy, you're bullying Mommy again." Mu Yaja was speechless. This brat is so biased. His little love rival, Mu Yaja, scolded him in his heart. It seemed that, in the future, not only would he have to compete with Yu Yu for Yun Shirshir's affections, but even this kid would have to join the battle. As sons, they all sided with their mother. Right now, both sons were protecting their mother without exception. Mu Yaja could not help but feel sour in his heart. He narrowed his eyes and couldn't help but think that it would be great if he had a daughter. It was said that daughters were their father's little lovers in their previous lives. Daughters always loved to stick to their fathers. Mu Yaja was also looking forward to having a little princess. Speaking of which, the Mu family had always been patriarchal. In the Mu family, a mother's status depended on her son. Although some words were unpleasant to hear, the idea of valuing sons over daughters had never changed. In the Mu family, a son was more precious than a daughter. Especially in a prestigious family like the Mu family, the status of having a son is different from those who have daughters. Putting everything else aside, Mu Sheng's third concubine had given birth to a daughter for her first 2 pregnancies. When she was pregnant with her 3rd child, she panicked and did a checkup to find out that it was still a daughter. Gritting her teeth, she stomped her feet and aborted the child. For the 4th time, a son finally came. Only then did he heave a sigh of relief. Although it was ironic, this was a common phenomenon among the noble families. Take the Song family, for example. Back then, Jiang Qiming was able to join the Song family not only because of her maternal family's influence, but also because of Jiang Yishan. After Jiang Yishan married into the Mu family, the Jiang family received a lot of favors from the Mu family, and their status in the capital rose accordingly. After Jiang Qiming joined the Song family was dissatisfied with this daughter-in-law. Chapter 1277. In the end, Song Zhengguo married Jiang Qiming. When Jiang Qiming first married into the Song family, Madame Song said that she hoped that she could bear children for the family. When these words entered Jiang Qiming's ears, she felt a little upset. She felt that she had become a fertility machine after marrying into the Song family. Before she married into the family, she heard that Madame Song was famous for favoring sons over daughters. Jiang Qiming had carefully inquired about it. At that time, Madame Song said to her, "Sons and daughters are the same. They are all the blood of the Jiang family, and Arjun was flesh and blood. Even if you give birth to a daughter, I will still treat and love her as my precious darling." Jiang Qiming successfully got pregnant after a year of marriage with Song Zhengguo. However, when the doctor told Madame Song that Jiang Qiming was pregnant with a girl, Madame Song's expression changed immediately. Jiang Qiming had secretly heard a conversation between Madame Song and Song Zhengguo. Madame Song secretly blamed Jiang Qiming for not being able to bear a son and scolded her constantly. What was even more ridiculous was that Madame Song actually said at the end of this conversation, "Zhengguo, Qiming's stomach is disappointing. If she can't bear a son for the 2nd time, you should take in another concubine. The Song family can't lose its roots. There are 3 ways to be unfilial, but having no descendants is the worst. Mom still hopes to carry a grandson." From then on, Madame Song's attitude toward Jiang Qiming changed a little. When the child was born, it turned out that it was a boy. It turned out that there was a mistake in the paternity test. When Madame Song saw that she had given birth to a son, she was surprised and overjoyed. Even her attitude toward Jiang Qiming changed a little. After having Song Yunxi as a son, Jiang Qiming gave birth to Song Enya and Song Enshi one after another. In addition, Mu Yaja especially doted on Song Enya and Song Enshi, so the 2 sisters were so favored in the Song family. However, Mu Yaja did not have such old-fashioned thoughts. In his heart, he preferred daughters. When Song and she was just born, he carried her in his arms. The child was so small. Her wrinkled little face was red, and her two little hands were grabbing his fingers randomly. She held them in her mouth and nibbled on his fingers happily. When Song and she's eyebrows matured a little, she entered his eyes and received more love from him. Every time he held this squishy little ball in his arms, he would fantasize that he could also have a daughter like this, small, soft, cute, beautiful, who liked to stick to him and play in his arms. Just thinking about it made him feel so happy. Unknowingly, this little princess complex is rooted in his heart. He always wanted a daughter, and sons as his thoughts. This was especially so when Yun Shirshir, with her son's protection, could not help lifting her chin and glancing at him smugly. In his eyes, it was obvious that she was flaunting. The idea of having a daughter became even more restless. Was Song's, he told her. He as two's families of all of this Song family. This sentence made Yun Shirshir's face look even more familiar. This father and son pair, she simply didn't know what to say. One of them said, "Give me a sister." The other said, "Let's have a daughter." The father and son were the same. How could they have a daughter just because they wanted one? How many people wanted to have a son but ended up with a daughter? Chapter 1278. So many people hoped for a daughter, but in the end, they gave birth to a son. Some things, the more one thought about it, the harder it was for them to come. Giving birth to a son or a daughter depended on fate. You couldn't just get what you wanted. Mu Yaja lowered his gaze and sized up Yun Shirshir's blushing face. He couldn't help but chuckle playfully and pecked her tender cheek. "Why? You don't want to?" Yun Shirshir said angrily, "Stop fooling around." When Mu Yichen saw the intimate scene between the two of them, he immediately covered his eyes shyly. However, at the same time, he didn't forget to open his fingers a little and peek through them. Mu Yaja snickered in his heart. This kid might look silly and adorable on the surface, but in reality, he could be very sly at times. The father and son looked at each other silently, their gazes secretly challenging each other. "Daddy, what were you whispering to Mommy just now?" Mu Yaja snorted coldly. His sexy lips opened and closed as he said, "It's a secret." Xiao Yichen was angry. He puffed up his cheeks and glared at him angrily. Yun Shirshir was amused by the confrontation between the father and son. What a pair of clowns, she thought to herself, but she also found it interesting. When Mu Yichen saw Yun Shirshir laughing secretly, he immediately looked at her with an aggrieved expression. "Mommy, Daddy is bullying me." Yun Shirshir didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Mommy, hug." Xiao Yichen looked like he was going to pounce into her embrace. However, Mu Yaja suddenly leaned forward and stood in between them. He took the opportunity to pull Yun Shirshir into his embrace. Xiao Yichen bumped into his hard back unexpectedly. He held his forehead in pain and looked up, only to see the provocation in Mu Yaja's eyes. Yun Shirshir. Xiao Yichen looked resentful. "Daddy, let go of my mommy. Mommy is mine. She's mine. It's mine. Mine." Xiao Yichen glared at him angrily. Mu Yaja was also unwilling to admit defeat. He held Yun Shirshir tightly in his arms, declaring his sovereignty to her. Yun Shirshir was completely speechless. What's going on? The father and son were actually fighting over her. Yun Shirshir couldn't help but feel confused. "All right, you two, stop fooling around." Yun Shirshir rebuked and reached out to pinch Mu Yaja's face. "And you bullying Xiao Yichen, huh?" Mu Yaja grabbed her hand and pecked her fingertips. His eyes were full of love. "What's wrong? Do you feel bad?" As he spoke, he leaned close to her ear and bitterly said, "Biased." She seemed to be accusing her of being biased towards her son. Yun Shirshir was amused by the hidden bitterness in his eyes. Mu Yichen suddenly licked his dry lips and said pitifully, "Mommy, I'm thirsty." Yun Shirshir immediately stood up. "Mommy will get you some water." "Okay." Xiao Yichen nodded cutely and smiled brightly. She walked over to the cabinet and picked up the kettle. However, she realized that there was no hot water in it. Hence, she said, "I'll go make some water. Baby, be good and lie down. Don't get out of bed and walk around. Okay, if you want to eat fruit, Mommy will peel an apple for you when I come back." "Okay." Xiao Yichen smiled. Yun Shirshir took the 2 kettles and left the ward. The moment the door closed, the father and son looked at each other and exchanged glances. Mu Yichen suddenly leaned against the headboard of the bed, slowly. He looked like an old man. Chapter 1279. Mu Yaja. He wondered where this kid had learned to speak in such a manner. Xiao Yichen slowly added, "I have a wish that I need you to fulfill." Mu Yaja's curiosity was piqued when he heard that. So he asked, "What wish?" "Work harder. I want Mommy to give birth to a little sister for me." Xiao Yichen spoke the truth. Mu Yaja couldn't help but laugh. This kid had the same thoughts as him. Xiao Yichen had no idea what Mu Yaja was thinking. He casually said, "I want a little sister. Daddy, you have to work harder and fulfill my wish as soon as possible." Mu Yaja asked, "Is that what you said to Mommy?" "Aha." Xiao Yichen paused for a moment before he nodded and said, "I told Mommy that I want a little sister." Mu Yaja muttered. Mu Yichen suddenly thought for a moment and couldn't help but ask, "Daddy, there's something I've wanted to ask you for a long time." Mu Yaja glanced at him quietly and asked, "What is it?" Xiao Yichen chuckled and leaned forward. He smiled and asked, "Where did I come from?" Mu Yaja was taken aback. Whether it was a child or not, they would ask this question. Why didn't he ask this question when he was young? Xiao Yichen noticed that he was silent for a long time and couldn't help but urge him. "Daddy, is this a difficult question? Tell me, tell me, tell me." Mu Yaja glanced at him and gave him an ambiguous answer. "You came from your mommy's stomach." Xiao Yichen furrowed his brows when he heard this. He didn't quite understand. He knew that he came from mommy's stomach. He had seen pregnant women with big bellies before. At first, when he saw those women's bellies swollen like balloons, he was a little surprised and thought that they were sick. However, the teacher replied that the reason why those women's bellies were so big was because they were pregnant with babies. Xiao Yichen couldn't help but feel amazed. Therefore, he also understood that when he was young, his mommy's belly must have swollen like those women. When she was pregnant with him, his mommy must have been very tired. A child's world was so pure and innocent, and their thirst for knowledge was so strong. Mu Yichen knew that he came from his mommy's stomach. But what he didn't understand was how he came to be in his mommy's stomach, and how he came out of her stomach. Thus, he asked the question in his heart, "Daddy, then answer me. How did I get into mommy's stomach?" Mu Yaja pondered for a moment, then threw out a typical official response. "You'll understand when you grow up." "What?" Xiao Yichen was very unhappy with this answer. He felt that it was perfunctory. Then he straightened his back, arched his arms, and showed off the muscles on his arms. "Daddy, I've already grown up." "Look." Mu Yaja was once again speechless. Tell me, how did I get in?" Xiao Yichen asked incessantly. Mu Yaja raised his brows, thought of a literary answer, and said mysteriously, "Because Daddy planted a seed in Mommy's body." Xiao Yichen widened his eyes in surprise. "A seed?" "Yes." A seed?" "You and your brother are that seed." "Oh." Chapter 1280. When Yun Shirsher returned. She saw Xiao Chen pestering Mu Yaja and asking relentlessly, "Daddy, Daddy, then how did you plant my brother and I into Mommy's body?" Yun Shirsher froze on the spot when she heard that. Her face flushed red again. She was embarrassed and annoyed as she glared at Mu Yaja angrily. She didn't know what the father and son were secretly discussing while she wasn't around. What did he mean by planted into Mommy's body? Why did these words sound so filthy and perverted the more she listened to them? The father and son clearly didn't realize that Yun Shirsher had pushed open the door and walked in. They were still discussing a certain sacred topic. As Mu Yaja peeled an apple for him, he said mysteriously, "You've been injected before, so you should know what it's like." "Yes, I know." Xiao Yichen nodded his head vigorously, his face full of curiosity. Mu Yaja said in a low voice, "It went in just like that." Yun Shirsher. Xiao Yichen widened his eyes in disbelief, but he still didn't quite understand. "Daddy, I don't really understand. It's a needle used for injections. Could it be that Daddy also used a needle to inject the seed?" Mu Yaja said impatiently, "Figure it out yourself." "Oh, I understand now. Daddy, is it that syringe?" Mu Yaja. Yun Shirsher. She was really a little flustered. "Then, how did my brother and I come out of Mommy's body?" Xiao Yichen pestered him again, once again displaying his strong curiosity. The little guy was determined to get to the bottom of this. Mu Yaja glanced at him. "Son, can you ask some questions that are beneficial to your body and mind? Isn't this a question that's beneficial to your body and mind?" Xiao Yichen retorted with a strange expression, leaving Mu Yaja speechless. Ahem, Yun Shirsher blushed. She clenched her fists and pretended to cough, instantly attracting the father and son's attention. She felt that if she didn't interrupt at the right time, who knew what this man was going to instill in his son? Oh my God! So embarrassing. What syringe injection? How could he answer like that? Xiao Yichen turned his head and saw Yun Shirsher return to the ward with 2 bottles of hot water. He immediately said enthusiastically, "Mommy, you're back." She gave him a gentle smile. "Yes, Mommy, come back." Then, from the corner of the corner of her eye, she glared at Mu Yichen. The latter sat calmly at the side, showing no signs of repentance. Yun Shirsher was even angrier when she saw this. Just as she sat down, Xiao Yichen stuck to her and asked the question that was interrupted just now. "Mommy, tell me, how did you and I come about?" Yun Shirsher turned her head with a smile and pinched his tender little face. "Why are you suddenly asking this question?" "I've been thinking about this question for a long time, but I still can't figure it out. How did I come about when Daddy and Mommy got together?" Xiao Yichen looked conflicted as he furrowed his brows. It looked like he had been troubled by this question for a long time. Mu Yaja looked at Yun Shirsher with a teasing and mischievous gaze. His thin lips curled up slightly with a hint of playfulness. He also wanted to see how she would answer this question. Yun Shirsher couldn't help but feel a little dazed. When she was young, she had asked her mother the same question. Chapter 1281. Her mother replied, "You are the product of Mommy and Daddy's love. Mommy and Daddy loved each other, and then they had you." When she reached puberty at the age of 12 or 13, she was still clueless about the relationship between men and women. Later on, she had biology classes in school. During class, she could still remember the shyness of the students when the teacher showed them the different biological structures of men and women. It was only during biology class that he realized that her arrival wasn't as simple as the crystallization of love. Hence, Yun Shirsher explained to Xiao Yichen, "Baby, have you seen a tadpole before?" Xiao Yichen nodded and said, "Yes, I have. A tadpole is small, black, and has a long tail. It's very cute." In the beginning, you were just tadpoles in Daddy's body. Xiao Yichen widened his eyes in surprise. I'm a tadpole in Daddy's body? As he spoke, his curious gaze landed on Mu Yaja, sizing him up from head to toe. He wished his eyes could see through the man's body as he widened them so much that they could penetrate his body. Mu Yaja was silent. This explanation was very good. It was very vivid. Yun Shirshir continued to explain. After Mommy and Daddy got together, the tadpole in Daddy's body swam and swam and swam into Mommy's body. As soon as she finished speaking, Mu Yaja couldn't help but chuckle. Yun Shirshir blushed and flew into a rage out of humiliation. She looked up and glared at him angrily. May I ask if you have any objections to my explanation? Mu Yaja regained his serious expression and said, No. Yun Shirshir covered her face in vexation. Belatedly, she also realized that her explanation was very dirty. However, in Xiao Yichen's eyes, this process was extremely profound. Although he did not fully understand what she was saying, his impression of her became more vivid and intuitive after listening to her words. Yun Shirshir used a metaphor to explain to him how the tadpole swam into her body, grew into a baby, and was finally born. At the end of the question, Xiao Yichen was still very confused. I more or less understand everything Mommy said. Xiao Yichen is the best. Xiao Yichen suddenly threw out a very thorny question. The point is, am I not a little tadpole? What I don't understand is how I swam from Daddy's body to Mommy's body. Yun Shirshir and Mu Yaja were stunned. It seemed that a child's thirst for knowledge could not be underestimated. From a certain point of view, it was extremely troublesome to answer a child's various questions perfectly. Even Mommy can't answer it. Xiao Yichen pursed his lips and looked a little disappointed. Yun Shirshir blushed with shame and said, This. Mu Yaja flicked his finger at his forehead and said, You won't understand even if I explain it to you, little idiot. Xiao Yichen held his forehead in pain and looked aggrieved. He stared at Mu Yaja anxiously and looked very hurt. Daddy, are you bullying me? Are you bullying me because I'm stupid? Uffed. Yun Shirshir almost burst out laughing. Did this child have to be so honest? He was so adorable. Mommy, you're laughing at me too. Xiao Yichen complained, feeling wronged. Chapter 1282. Yun Shirshir smiled and poured Xiao Yichen a glass of water before placing it on the cupboard next to his hand. Xiao Yichen took a sip the moment he received it. The moment his lips came into contact with the boiling water, he exclaimed in surprise, It's so hot. Yun Shirshir was shocked and quickly asked, Are you scalded? Little idiot, can't you wait for the water to turn cold before drinking it? Xiao Yichen realized that his mommy seemed to be able to call him little idiot so smoothly. Was he really that stupid? Mu Yichen looked into the distance with tears in his eyes. Lasagna tears. Xiao Yichen was like a delicate flower. He blinked innocently and acted coquettishly at Yun Shirshir. It's scalded in my mouth. Mommy will blow on it. He seemed to have forgotten that during his survival training in the wild, when he was trapped in the snow with no food or water, he would directly grab the snow on the ground and stuff it into his mouth, let alone boiling water. However, when it came to Yun Shirshir, he was no longer as imposing as before. Instead, he was as soft as a delicate flower bud, making people want to love him tenderly. Yun Shirshir immediately cupped his face in her hands and gently blew on the corner of his scalded lips. You're really scalded. Baby, does it hurt? Yun Shirshir's heart ached. Mu Yaja chillingly said, He's not that delicate. When Xiao Yichen heard this, he felt even more wronged as he snuggled into Yun Shirshir's arms. At the same time, he shot a provocative look at Mu Yaja. Mu Yaja was furious. This brat was clearly provoking him. Yun Shirshir glared at him. Why don't you try getting scalded? You only know how to make sarcastic remarks. Yaja was speechless. That's right. Daddy only knows how to make sarcastic remarks. He doesn't care about her at all. Humph. Xiao Yichen followed behind and fanned the flames. Yaja's face turned completely cold. It was as if a layer of snow had covered his face in the middle of winter, chilling one to the bone. Suddenly, a series of slow footsteps came from outside the door. Then, the door of the ward was slowly pushed open. Mu Sheng, in his hospital gown, stood at the door. The moment the door was opened, the wind from the window blew into the huge ward and brushed against his clothes. With the wind blowing, his clothes fluttered, making him look even more frail and boneless. He narrowed his eyes slightly and looked in the direction of the hospital bed. The scene of the 3 people joyfully and harmoniously fell into his eyes. Mu Sheng looked at Yun Shirshir unblinkingly. He did not dare to make a sound to disturb them. He only stood in a remote corner and watched quietly. He was content. He felt extremely guilty towards Yun Shirshir from the bottom of his heart. This child, because of him, must have suffered a lot of grievances and hardships. If it wasn't for her, her life would have been very ordinary and peaceful. Now, however, because of him, she had suffered so much injustice. When he thought of this, he could not forgive himself. Don't even dream of getting her forgiveness. Xiao Yichen raised his head and suddenly noticed someone standing at the door of the ward. He widened his eyes and was stunned when he saw Mu Sheng standing at the door. Great Master, he called out subconsciously. Yun Shirshir was stunned. She could not help but follow his line of sight and look behind her. When she saw that it was Mu Sheng, her face turned cold in an instant. Why are you here? His voice was cold and distant. It was obvious that he was very resistant to his arrival. Chapter 1283. He rubbed his hands nervously and looked at her in shame. His old and haggard face could not hide the guilt he was feeling. I'm here to see the children. Is that okay? He asked carefully. He had let go of all his arrogance and pride to appear so humble. His careful probing tone was as weak as a cicada's wing. Fear was written all over his face. He was afraid that she would heartlessly reject him. Yun Shirshir looked at him coldly. Her eyes flickered, and she took a deep breath, but she still took a step back. Sure, as an old man and Mu Yichen's great-grandfather, it was understandable that he wanted to come in to see the children. She had no right to stop him. Previously, her attitude towards him was all because when she saw him, she thought of the 2 children whose life and death were uncertain. Her heart was filled with hatred. If it wasn't for this foolish old man, perhaps the 2 children wouldn't have fallen into such a dangerous situation. She hated his foolishness and his blindness. She hated that because of him, her mother had passed away at a young age. She hated that because of him, she had suffered so much. However, now that she knew that the 2 children were safe, her hatred for him had more or less subsided. She was not a magnanimous person, but she knew very well that even though this old man had committed many mistakes and made many foolish choices in his life, he was, at the very least, Mu Yaja's grandfather and Mu Yichen's great-grandfather. However, the bond of blood was difficult to erase. Moreover, this pitiful old man had 1 foot in the grave. Even if she could not forgive him, she would not blame him too much either. Seeing her consent, Mu Sheng was startled. Leaning on his cane and supported by the nurse, he slowly walked into the ward. His footsteps were heavy and slow. Perhaps his body had reached its limit, but he did not know what was supporting his weak will. He understood from the doctor that he did not have much time left and that his life was coming to an end. However, in his heart, There were still so many regrets that he could not let go of, and so many knots that had yet to be untied. How could he close his eyes in peace? Therefore, when he knew that he didn't have much time left, he passed the position of the family head, which symbolized the highest authority, to Muyaja. He knew in his heart that he had done a lot of wrong to this grandson of his. With so much money, it would more or less make up for the mistakes he had made earlier. The nurse helped him sit down by the bed. Mu Sheng raised his head and looked at Xiao Yichen with his cloudy eyes. He did not speak, but his eyes were filled with relief. Xiao Yichen, on the other hand, had complicated feelings for Mu Sheng. His impression of the old man was that he was strict, stubborn, and even paranoid. Usually, he was serious in speech and manner, and his tone was stiff. When he looked at people, his eyes were as sharp as an eagle's, extremely piercing. Somehow, he felt that the old man was difficult to get close to. Hence, ever since they were young, he and Mu Sheng were indeed a little distant. Even if Mu Sheng wanted to get close to him, he would stay far away from him. Now, however, the little guy suddenly felt that this great-grandfather of his was quite pitiful. It was an indescribable feeling, especially when he saw the old man's eyes when he looked at Yun Shirshir. There was hope, guilt, self-blame, regret, heartache, and annoyance. Chapter 1284. Mu Sheng's arrival caused the warm atmosphere in the ward to turn cold all of a sudden. Mu Yaja looked at him and asked calmly, "Grandpa, you're not feeling well. Why did you get out of bed?" Mu Sheng sighed. The high-spirited look on his face was gone. "I feel uncomfortable lying down all day, so I wanted to walk around. While I can still walk, I came to see the child." Yun Shirshir was stunned, but her face remained cold, and she did not say anything. These words sounded rather pitiful to the ears. Mu Yichen did not feel good when he heard this. Children were easily soft-hearted. In their naive world, they all hoped for a peaceful family and prosperity. Although he did not like this old man's stubborn and stern look in the past, looking at him now, he found him to be rather pitiful. In fact, he did not know about the feud between Mu Sheng and Yun Shirshir, so he could not help but feel soft-hearted. He said softly, "Grandpa, you're not feeling well. Go back to the ward and rest." Hearing this, Mu Sheng's gloomy face was moved. His heart was filled with warmth as he said sentimentally, "Xiao Yichen, I'm here to see you. You've suffered such a serious injury. My heart aches, and I want to sit and accompany you." "Grandpa, my injuries don't hurt anymore." Xiao Yichen did not seem to mind. In fact, he was very good at enduring pain. If other children had his injuries, they would have cried and wailed, but he acted as if nothing had happened to him. After all, he had trained since he was young, and his willpower was extraordinarily tenacious. This was also the reason why Mu Yaja insisted on throwing him into the military camp for training when he was young. Boys should know how to endure hardships from a young age and train their willpower. Children nowadays were all spoiled and spoiled. They were too delicate. He did not want his son to be raised into a little princess. Boys should be trained. Hearing this, Mu Sheng smiled and gently placed his wrinkled hand on the back of his son's hand. When Grandpa Mu was young, he had been in the army. He had been on the battlefield and had also trained. His hand that had held a gun before had a thick layer of calluses on it. Now that he was old, his hand was rough and coarse. It was painful to look at. Yun Shirshir looked at him indifferently. Her face was expressionless, and her eyes were cold, although she felt sorry for the old man and found him to be rather pitiful. How could he not be hateful when he was pitiful? There was a saying that went like this: a pitiful person must have a hateful side. It made sense. When this old man was young, he was also a person who could summon the wind and summon the rain. With such a prominent position, He could cover the sky with one hand. Just now, in ancient times, he was also a figure of a generation of warlords, generals, ministers, and even the monarch of a country. When he was young, he was swift and decisive, but when he got older, he became muddle-headed and made some mistakes. Her impression of him was all from her mother: selfish, foolish, and cruel executioner. Other than that, there was no direct impression. However, although he wasn't the main cause of his mother's death and his brother's separation, he was a part of the reason. Hence, it was difficult for her to let go and forgive him. The pain of losing a loved one was still deeply ingrained in her heart. Although this wound had scabbed over with the passage of time, it was still unbearably painful when touched. An unintentional mistake was still a mistake. Chapter 1285. It did not mean that she could be forgiven just because it was unintentional. She was not magnanimous enough to forgive someone who had driven her mother to her death. Yun Shirshir stood up abruptly and walked to the window. With her back facing the old man, she looked out the window. She did not want to see him, even if it was just a glance. Mu Sheng raised his head and looked at Yun Shirshir's cold and resolute back view. His eyes were filled with grief and helplessness. He stood up and walked to Yun Shirshir's side. He carefully reached out his aged hand, wanting to place it on her shoulder. However, at the thought of Yun Shirshir's cold expression when she looked at him earlier, his outstretched hand froze in midair, and he slowly retracted it. "Shirshir, turn around and let Grandpa take a good look at you, okay?" He pleaded in his heart. His face was miserable, and his eyes were glistening with tears. Yun Shirshir did not move and did not turn around. His heart was filled with misery as he pleaded again and again. "Grandpa knows his mistake. It's really his mistake. Grandpa really doesn't ask for your forgiveness. I only ask that you give Grandpa a chance to make it up to you. Sure. Actually, Grandpa has been so many years." With a sigh, he reached out to hold her hand. Yun Shirshir dodged him out of the blue, causing his hand to miss her. The corner of his lips twitched, and his face was instantly filled with grief. Tears actually rolled down his cheeks at once. He was an 80-year-old man. In his life, he had always been resolute. He had always been stubborn and arrogant. He had never shown such a weak side before. In front of Mu Yaja and Xiao Yichen, his face was filled with tears. He was so sad. "At least give Grandpa a chance to make it up to you. Even if it's just a chance to atone for my sins, it's good enough." He pleaded again and again. His weathered voice sounded from behind her. "Sure. Grandpa knows that I've done many foolish things in my life. Grandpa knows his mistake. Grandpa is really wrong. Grandpa is old and muddle-headed. That's why I took a thief as my daughter. If you can forgive Grandpa, you can call me whatever you want. Grandpa?" Yun Shirshir sucked in a deep breath of cold air and turned around abruptly. Her cold eyes pierced his body fiercely. However, she laughed mockingly and sarcastically said with an expressionless face, "You think you're qualified to call yourself my grandfather?" The old man stared at her with widened eyes in shock. "Do you know what my mother said about you?" She suddenly smiled cruelly, and her face turned cold. "My mother said that you are a cruel executioner, a murderer who destroyed her life. It was you who destroyed her happiness. It was you who caused her to wander about in misery. She said that the Mu family was a dragon's lair and a tiger's den. She told me not to take a single step into it. She even said that the Mu family's Mu Sheng was the cruelest and most terrifying executioner in the world. You want me to forgive you? That's a big mistake." His face turned ashen at her words as he stared at her in disbelief. The emotions in his eyes fluctuated unpredictably, from the initial shock and astonishment to the subsequent pain and disappointment, and finally regret and heartache. He really did not expect that Ching-chung, whom he had always doted on and treated as his own, would say such cruel words. Chapter 1286. Mu Sheng felt waves of pain in his chest. His heart was already in a state of failure. Now that he was agitated by Yun Shishir's words, he froze and found it hard to move. His face alternated between green and white as his breathing quickened. He clutched his chest tightly, his face contorting in pain. Yun Shishir did not know what condition he was in. She thought that the old man was pretending to be pitiful to gain her sympathy. Was it useful to pretend to be pitiful? She would never forgive him. Thinking of her mother being buried in a sea of fire, Yun Shishir hated him even more. She said coldly, "You leave. I don't want to see you again." Mu Sheng clutched his chest and did not move. He only bit his lower lip and looked at her with a face full of pain. Yun Shishir sized him up and asked, "Why? You're not leaving? You're not leaving, are you?" After a pause, her lips twitched, and she said expressionlessly, "Fine. If you're not leaving, I'll leave." With that, Yun Shishir turned around and walked toward the door. Mu Sheng finally panicked. He hurriedly reached out to pull her, but halfway through, his whole body suddenly convulsed. He stiffened and collapsed to the ground. Seeing this, Mu Yaja was startled. He walked forward and supported him with his strong arms. Yun Shishir turned her head when she heard the strange commotion, only to see the old man fainting from anger. Her face stiffened at once. Mu Yaja lowered his head to look at the old man with a cold face. When he raised his head and met Yun Shishir's startled gaze, he lightly reminded her, "The old man's health is not good." Hence, he carried the old man in his arms and hurriedly left the ward. Yun Shishir furrowed her brows in a daze. Without thinking much, she subconsciously followed Mu Yaja's footsteps. By the time they arrived, Mu Sheng had already been sent to the emergency room. The door was tightly shut, and Mu Yaja was sitting outside with a cigarette between his fingers. He was deep in thought with a frown. She slowly walked up. She seemed to have realized that the words she had said in front of the old man were too hurtful. For a moment, she felt a little vexed. Yun Shishir lowered her head and leaned against him. She remained silent for a long time without saying a word. The lights in the operating theater were switched on for several hours. Mu Yaja was waiting outside the door. He was sitting on a bench with an icy expression on his face. Yun Shishir sat at the side, and both of them were silent. After what felt like a century, Mu Yaja suddenly said, "I used to hate him as much as you do." Mu Sheng was once the man whom he hated to the core. Grandpa Mu was a traditional man. He was old-fashioned and dogmatic. He had done many things that made him gnash his teeth in anger. However, no matter how many mistakes he had made, the fortune and misfortune in his life were all related to him. His greatest fortune was to be able to meet Yun Shishir. If not for Mu Sheng, he might have missed her in this lifetime. Regardless of whether it was right or wrong, everything seemed to be destined. Because of that, his hatred had already been diluted by quite a bit. Yun Shishir did not understand the meaning behind his words. Just as she was stunned, the door to the operating theater suddenly opened. When the doctor saw Mu Yaja, he respectfully walked up to him. His tone was respectful, but his face was full of regret. Chapter 1287. Mu Yaja raised his eyebrows. The doctor continued, "Please prepare for his funeral. Anyway, he won't be out for more than a month. If you serve him well and take good care of him, he might be able to live a little longer." Got it. He was not surprised by this outcome. He knew very well that Mu Sheng's condition was terrible. He was struggling at death's door. Every day he lived was a day less. Yun Shishir was secretly shocked when she heard this. She did not expect Mu Sheng's condition to be so bad that they had to prepare for his funeral. She walked into the ward in a daze and sat by the bed, looking at the sickly Mu Sheng lying unconscious on the bed. Her heart sank all of a sudden. A nurse suddenly rushed into the ward with something in her hand. She carefully walked up to Yun Shirshir when she saw her sitting by the bed. "Hello, this is something the patient left behind in the operating room. Please keep it for him." "Okay." Yun Shirshir reached out her hand in a daze. The nurse opened her palm and placed a jade pendant in her hand. Her eyes widened in shock when she saw it. This should be the patient's personal item. When he was sent to the operating room, he held it tightly in his hand. I spent a lot of effort to pry his hand off, but I didn't expect it to be a jade pendant. This jade pendant should be very important to him. With that, the nurse smiled politely and left the ward. Yun Shirshir held the jade pendant in her hand and carefully pinched it. The jade pendant fell into two halves. She carefully picked up one of the jade pendants and scrutinized it. Her heart skipped a beat. This was her mother's relic. It was her mother's personal jade pendant. She did not expect it to be one of a pair of jade pendants. The two jade pendants were a pair. They formed a small, oval jade plate and were evenly separated in the middle. Each jade pendant was in the shape of a crescent moon. They were exquisitely carved with beautiful hollow patterns and gold inlaid in the middle. One look, and one could tell that they had been baptized for a few years. On the surface, they looked a little weathered, but the quality was excellent. When she was young, she didn't know much about jade. She only knew that this jade pendant was always worn by her mother. But now, this jade pendant had been separated from her for more than 10 years, and in the end, it had returned to its rightful owner and returned to her hands. Yun Shirshir could not help but feel a little absent-minded. This jade pendant matched perfectly with the other jade pendant. Did he always carry the jade pendant with him? Even though he had fainted, he still held it tightly in his hand and refused to let go. What kind of obsession was this? Yun Shirshir heard that Mu Sheng doted on Mu Qingcheng to the core. Now that she saw it, it was true. He had even put down his noble airs and humbled himself in front of her, begging for her forgiveness. She knew how important his mother was to him. Come to think of it, he also knew that he didn't have much time left. Perhaps he had some kind of obsession and didn't want to leave this world with regrets. Yun Shirshir furrowed her brows. Her eyes were filled with emotions, and her expression was complicated. Xiao Yichen walked to the door of the ward and saw Yun Shirshir maintaining the same posture as she looked down at Mu Sheng, who was lying on the bed. His heart suddenly felt uncomfortable. He walked behind her, reached out his hand, and gently hugged her shoulder. "Mommy, Chapter 1288. I heard from Daddy that Grandpa's condition isn't too good, so I'm here to visit him." Yun Shirshir hugged him in her arms and gently kissed his forehead. Xiao Yichen said, "Mommy, let's take a family photo when little brother comes home, okay?" He paused for a moment before adding, "Let's take a family photo with great-grandpa." Yun Shirshir was stunned, but Mu Yichen continued, "That's because great-grandpa told me that his biggest wishes to take a family photo while he's still alive." She was silent for a moment before her lips curled into a smile. "Okay." After 2 days of recuperation, Yun Tianyu's body had regained some of its vitality. Other than the wound on his shoulder, which was caused by the animal trap, which was a little serious, there were no other major issues. The Zhao family's funeral was over. Ever since they returned from the funeral, Li Ru had been busy. After the funeral, the family did not have much savings left. Li Ru often sat in front of the coffin with a face full of worry. In the middle of the night, she would often hold the only photo Zhao Xiangjuan had left behind and cry her eyes out. She really could not understand how a living person could pass away just like that. Zhao Linghua and Lil Pi, who were originally lively, had also become depressed, especially Lingling. Ever since she came back from the funeral, she had been sitting alone in Zhao Xiangjuan's room, hugging Zhao Xiangjuan's belongings with a dull expression. Yu got off the bed and walked to the window. Suddenly, he heard some movement. He put on a jacket and saw a few children running toward a place. Lingling, come quickly. A child ran into the house and pulled Zhao Linghua, who was working, by the hand. She said excitedly, Lingling, let's go and see. There are a few beautiful cars in the village. It's so rare. Let's go take a look. No, I still have work to do. Lingling was still a little sullen. The child, however, did not allow her to explain and shouted, You can do your work when you're back. Let's go see something rare. As she said that, she pulled Lingling and ran out of the house. Yu stood in the courtyard with his brows slightly furrowed. Vermilion Bird walked up to him and said, Director Yun, the Mu family is here to take you back. Yu and Vermilion Bird walked out of the house. Just as they reached the entrance of the village, they saw a group of villagers crowded around it. Everyone's eyes were filled with admiration and reverence as they looked at the row of luxurious cars parked at the entrance of the village. Everyone raised their heads and kept squeezing forward just to get a closer look at the cars that they could only see on TV and see what they looked like. To the villagers of Anyang Village, a car was a very rare thing. The villagers had never even seen an ordinary car before, let alone a Jeep or a Mercedes-Benz. It could be seen how backward Anyang Village was in the backwater. A row of cars was parked at the entrance of the village, led by a black Hummer. Its streamlined body and beautiful appearance attracted everyone's attention. The person sitting in that car must be a big boss. I've been to the city and seen cars like that. Only big bosses can afford to sit in such cars. Everyone could not hide the envy in their eyes. Chapter 1289. Especially those unmarried girls in the village. When they saw him, all of them blushed and looked at him in amazement. Oh my God, this man is so handsome, just like the celebrities on TV. So handsome. Who is this man? Why did he come to our village? Look, is he looking in my direction? Don't be so smug. Mu Yaja was dressed in a casual suit, looking neat and tidy. One look, and one could tell that he was either rich or respectable. Everyone guessed that this man must be a big boss from the city. Looking at his attire and his elegant and extraordinary temperament, it was obvious that he came from a wealthy family. How could an ordinary person have such an extraordinary temperament? Even though they were separated by a distance, the man's tall and handsome facial features, as well as his cold and noble aura, could not help but be deeply shocked even though they were dozens of meters away. There was an invisible air of nobility around this man. He was like a proud dragon that made people involuntarily submit to him. Such a person, no matter where he appeared, was like a god that could not be ignored. Zhao Linghua was also shocked by the man's handsome and tall figure. Growing up in the countryside, she had seen many dark-skinned, stocky men, but it was rare to see someone who was even more dazzling than the celebrities on TV. He was as elegant as a high and mighty prince. Ling had never seen such a good-looking person. Even if it was just a glance, she could not shift her gaze away from him. Suddenly, her gaze fell on the man's face, and she could not help but frown slightly. She felt that this man's eyebrows were somewhat familiar. Yu, that little brother. Ling was shocked. This man looked so much like little brother, especially that pair of eyes. They were very similar. At this moment, another woman came out of the car. She was wearing a black dress. It was graceful and elegant, beautiful and refined. Although it was an ordinary dress, it made her look extremely elegant and noble. She had an elegant temperament. Everyone was shocked again. The woman in front of them seemed to be made of jade. She was exquisitely carved, delicate like a porcelain doll. Her skin was so delicate and white. Her face was flawless like white jade. Her facial features were exquisite beyond compare. She was pure and beautiful. So beautiful. This woman is really beautiful. Look at her skin. It's so white and smooth. It's as beautiful as jade. Her hair is so long and black, just like satin. Her eyes are so beautiful. Just one look, and my soul is about to be taken away by them. The girls in the city are really different. They take such good care of themselves. The villagers exclaimed one after another. Some of the young ladies couldn't help but feel ashamed of their inferiority. They lowered their heads to look at their own rough hands from farm work, and then looked at the woman's slender fingers. Their faces couldn't help but darken. As soon as Yun Shirshir got out of the car, she saw the villagers gathered at the entrance of the village. She couldn't help but be startled, and then she politely smiled at them. This smile was like 100 flowers blooming. Some people even felt a little dizzy. This big sister looks really good when she smiles, just like the beautiful princess dolls on TV. Chapter 1290. A few children surrounded Yun Shirshir and chattered, their faces full of yearning. Yu was blocked by the crowd and couldn't see what was going on at the entrance of the village. He could only hear the sounds of exclamations coming one after another. Red Sparrow followed beside him. She was afraid that the crowd would squeeze him. So she lowered her body and hugged him with one hand while using the other to push the crowd aside. Her strength was really amazing. With just a wave of her hand, a burly man was pushed aside by her, as if she was a rich girl. The man almost fell over. He turned around and was about to curse when he saw Red Sparrow's cold eyes. He was so scared that he immediately shut up. Red Sparrow was very tall, at 8 meters, and had an extremely domineering aura. When Yu saw this scene, he thought to himself, the women of Mercenary Paradise are really different. He thought that Lisa was already amazing enough. He didn't expect Red Sparrow to be one of the top female devils in Mercenary Paradise. His valiant martial strength, coupled with his pair of ice-cold eyes, was extremely frightening. Yu. Lingling's voice suddenly came from the crowd. When she saw Yu, her eyes widened, and she hurriedly called out to him. The slightly urgent shout was so abrupt in the crowd that it startled Yun Shirshir. Yu. She seemed to have heard a child call out Yu's name. Where was Yu? Yun Shirshir hurriedly walked toward the crowd. Muyaja grabbed her and pulled her back to his side. What's wrong? Don't walk around. Muyaja glanced at Minyu from the corner of his eyes. Why are there so many people around? Minyu broke out in a cold sweat. He turned around and looked at the crowd helplessly. As soon as his car stopped, he heard someone in the crowd shout, "The big boss of the village is here." Not long after, the entrance was surrounded by the villagers who had heard of it. "Chairman Mu, please wait for a moment. I'll go and evacuate the crowd," Minyu said, and walked forward with his men. Suddenly, a commotion broke out in the crowd. As the crowd dispersed, Yu saw Muyaja and Yun Shirshir. She was surprised and shouted, "Daddy, Mommy!" When Yun Shirshir heard the voice, she looked in the direction of the voice. When she saw Yu in Zhu Kei's arms, her expression changed, and she walked towards him with a smile. Muyaja also saw Yu. He gently pushed aside the people in front of him and walked towards Zhu Quebec. Everyone was dumbstruck. When they regained their senses, the picturesque beauty had already hugged the child tightly in her arms. The man who looked unapproachable also walked over. He reached out and took the child from the woman's arms. Only then did everyone realize that these two people were the child's parents. Everyone was surprised. What a young father and mother. This woman looked so young. She was probably in her early 20s. She was so delicate that if it weren't for her mature appearance, one would think that she was a high school student who had just graduated. Then look at this man. It was no wonder that this child was born with such an exquisite and handsome appearance. He had an elegant and noble temperament. It turned out that he had inherited his father's deep facial features and noble temperament. Chapter 1291. As for the other ladies, they began to feel jealous of Yun Shirshir. She was young and beautiful, had such a handsome and wealthy husband, and had such a handsome and adorable son. She could be said to be a winner in life. Why didn't they have such a good opportunity? As for the men, they looked at each other. Daddy? Mommy? It was the first time that the villagers heard such a westernized term. This person from the city was indeed different. In the main hall of the Zhao family, Li Ru sat uneasily in her seat as she looked at the man and woman in front of her, who were dressed in bright and beautiful clothes. She seemed to be a little restless. Lingling and Lil P were nestled next to her. They closed their mouths nervously and looked timidly at Muyaja and Yun Shirshir, who were sitting in the guest seat. Li Ru was secretly guessing their identities. Earlier on, she found out from Yu Yu that the handsome man in front of her was his father and the beautiful woman was his mother. Li Ru was extremely surprised. She had never expected Yu Yu's parents to be so young. Moreover, they were a perfect match and looked like aristocrats. Hence, she couldn't help but feel a little awkward sitting in front of them. She felt ashamed of her own inferiority. However, from a certain point of view, it wasn't that surprising. The first time she saw Yu Yu, she knew that his parents wouldn't be too bad if they could give birth to such a cute and handsome child. Now that she saw them, she was really amazed. When Yun Shirshir saw Li Ru, she knew that this simple and honest woman in front of her was the one who saved her son. She hugged her gratefully and thanked her again and again. Li Ru was trembling with fear. She didn't even dare to hold Yun Shirshir's hand for fear of dirtying it. Yun Shirshir didn't know what she was thinking. She held her hand and smiled gently. This made Li Ru feel an inexplicable sense of inferiority. She hurriedly welcomed them into the house. Li Ru served them tea and said carefully, "It's just plain tea. I hope you don't mind." "You're too polite." Yun Shirshir smiled. Li Ru's face turned even redder. She rubbed her hands on her apron and returned to her seat. However, she seemed inexplicably uneasy. Lingling suddenly said sincerely, Yu Yu, your mother is so beautiful." The boy's lips curled into a smile when he heard that. Yun Shirshir smiled at Lingling when she saw her hiding timidly. Seeing Yun Shirshir smile at her, Lingling blushed and asked shyly, "Beautiful auntie, are you here to take Yu Yu home?" Yun Shirshir smiled and said, Thank you for taking care of Yu Yu for the past 2 days. Today, I'm here to bring Yu Yu home." Lingling suddenly felt a little reluctant to part with him. At the side, Dowda suddenly said sarcastically, "Humph! He was a jinx. If it wasn't for him, Father wouldn't have died. He was the one who caused Father's death." As soon as he finished speaking, the boy's expression changed. Li Ru and Lingling froze. Li Ru looked at Yun Shirshir's shocked expression and immediately scolded Dowdu, "Don't spout nonsense." "Mother, I'm not spouting nonsense. He was the one who caused Father's death." Dowda whined pitifully. "What do you mean?" Mu Yaja furrowed his brows, and his handsome eyes flashed with a cold light. Dowda glanced at him and shrunk timidly to one side. She seemed to be extremely afraid of his cold aura. She even stuttered when she spoke. Chapter 1292. I'm not spouting nonsense. If not for If not for this troublemaker, father wouldn't have died. As soon as she finished speaking, Dowdo felt a lump in her throat. She grabbed her mother's clothes and cried sadly. Li Ru's face was full of awkwardness. Lingling, who was standing at the side, seemed to have lost all her strength at the mention of this sad matter. Her eyes reddened. Deep down, she knew that this matter had nothing to do with Yu, but if not for Yu, her father would be fine. However, she was very clear about gratitude and grudges. She did not blame him. Dowdo, however, was not as clear-minded as her. Having lost her father at such a young age, she put all the blame on Yu. Yu pursed his lips and snuggled into Yun Shirshir's embrace. His eyelashes drooped a little forlornly. He was obviously a little sad, too. Li Ru immediately tried to smooth things over. The child is immature and said some unruly things. Please don't take it to heart. What exactly happened? Yun Shirshir keenly sensed that this matter was not as simple as it seemed. She wanted to get to the bottom of it. When Li Ru heard this, she sighed but did not say anything. She did not blame Yu, but the pillar of the family had collapsed. As a widow and an orphan with 2 children, she really did not know what to do in the future. Yu had instructed Vermilion Bird to give her a sum of money. She refused to accept it no matter what. Vermilion Bird thought that he was being courteous and said that there were a few million yuan in the envelope, which included Zhao Xiangjuan's funeral expenses and some compensation. She regretfully said that a human life could not be measured by money, but at the same time, on behalf of Yun Tianyu, she conveyed that if there was anything she needed in the future, just let her know. Li Ru's tears fell the next second. It turned out that the collapse of the family's pillar in the village was not something that could be measured by money. What was the use of money? In Anyang village, the rice that every household ate was grown in their own fields, the firewood was chopped from the mountains, and the oil was obtained from the oil mill. All of this required a man to bear the responsibility. She was an orphan and a widow. Without a man to support her in the family, she would definitely be bullied. Who knew if someone would gossip behind her back? Today, as soon as she left the house, someone followed her behind and scolded her for being a jinx. Her in-laws had already spat on her because of Zhao Xiangjuan's death. Li Ru's heart was bitter. Dowdo leaned against him with red eyes. She pursed her lips and didn't say anything. When Yu saw this, she couldn't bear it and whispered into Mu Yaja's ear, "Daddy, Uncle Zhao's death is indeed related to me. If it wasn't for me, the Zhao family wouldn't have fallen into such a miserable state. Bring them back to the capital." Mu Yaja frowned and looked at him. "What's going on?" "It's him." When Yu mentioned this name, the anger in her eyes could no longer be concealed. Even if he did not find out the identity of these assassins, he judged that they were most likely the pursuers sent by Mu Lianjue. It seemed that they had the intention of dying together. These people did not leave any leeway for them and did not care about life or death. If not for Zhao Xiangjuan, he might not have been able to tell whether he was dead or alive. Yu whispered in his ear and recounted what happened after he was rescued by Zhao Xiangjuan in a concise manner. Chapter 1293. This Mu Lianjue was really gutsy. He actually dared to kill a child. He even sent out so many vicious assassins. How ruthless! How ruthless! Everyone who came from the Mu family was so ruthless. Yun Shirshir could not hear what Yu and Mu Yaja were whispering to each other, but just by looking at the man's sullen face, she was frightened by the intimidating aura he exuded. "What's wrong?" she asked softly as she covered the back of his hand. Mu Yaja sneered inwardly. His murderous intent was boiling, but he quickly regained his composure. "Nothing," he replied. He did not want her to be involved in this matter. Mu Yaja said to Li Ru, "First of all, I'd like to express my regret about this matter. No matter what the reason is, we'll take responsibility for it. If you're willing, will bring you to the capital. How about it? The capital? Li Ru was a little restless. This isn't appropriate, is it? After bringing you to the capital, I'll arrange a place for you to stay and the best education for the 2 children. Min Yu, who was at the side, said, "Please put it down. Since Chairman Mu has put this on the table, he'll arrange the best place for you to stay. Not to mention anything else, you and the 2 children won't have to worry about food and clothing for the rest of your life. After all, you've done the little master a favor. So please let us repay your kindness." Lingling's eyes widened in shock when she heard this. Minyu continued, "Forgive me for being blunt, but Chairman Mu made this arrangement because your husband passed away and the family has lost its pillar of support. He's afraid that you and the 2 children will be bullied. So he made this arrangement. Even if you don't think for yourself, you should think for the 2 children." Li Ru was speechless when she heard this and could only carefully accept it. Thank you, Boss Mu. However, we'll have to wait until the funeral is over before we can consider the next step. Here, I'd like to thank Boss Mu for his kindness." In the end, according to Yu Yu's decision, after Li Ru settled everything here, she would settle them down in the capital. Yun Shirshir carried Yu Yu into the room and carefully checked his injuries. However, when she saw the wound on his shoulder caused by the animal trap, her eyes immediately turned red. She couldn't hold back her guilt, and her tears fell. Yu Yu sighed helplessly. He cupped her face and carefully wiped the tears off her face. "Mommy, you're already in your 20s. Why do you still cry so much? Don't cry, okay? When you cry, my heart hurts so much that it feels numb." Yun Shirshir did not know whether to laugh or cry at his self-righteous words. When she thought about how he got all these injuries, she pursed her lips in heartache. Holding back her tears, she grabbed his hand and slapped it twice on the back of his hand. "Yu Yu, you're naughty." "All right, it's Yu Yu who's naughty and made Mommy worry." Yu Yu's eyes curved into crescents as he looked at her dotingly. His eyes seemed to be filled with a gentle smile and were full of tenderness. Yun Shirshir said, "You always make Mommy worry. You shouldn't have swapped places with Mommy that day. Mommy is injured." Yu Yu said honestly, "I can't just stand by and watch Mommy get hurt." Yun Shirshir's heart was deeply touched. Yu Yu. Chapter 1294. Yu Yu looked up at her, then jumped into her arms and wrapped his arms around her waist. "Mommy, I really love you. No matter what it is, as long as you're happy, I'm willing to do anything." Yun Shirshir sighed in her heart. This child was so precocious and could even say such touching words. She had mixed feelings. She didn't know if she should be touched or feel complicated. She gently caressed his face. "Yu Yu, Mommy loves you too. She loves you more than life itself." Yu Yu quietly gazed at her face and asked carefully, "Then, no matter what Yu Yu becomes, Mommy will still love Yu Yu?" "Yes, no matter what Yu Yu becomes, Mommy will still love Yu Yu. That's enough." Yu Yu smiled contentedly and hugged her tightly. "Where's Xiaoi Chen? Are the wounds on your body better?" "Better. That guy's body is so strong. He can already get out of bed and jump around." However, out of consideration, she didn't bring Xiaoi Chen with her. Because of this, little Li Chen was probably still sulking at this moment. The family of 3 decided to head back to the capital after lunch. Li Ru prepared a table of sumptuous dishes. In order to entertain them, she served all kinds of fish and meat. She even slaughtered a rooster that hadn't crowed yet. The free-range chicken that they raised at home was very tender. When Yun Shirshir and Yu Yu walked out, Mu Yaja was already seated. However, Li Ru, Lingling, and Lil Pi seemed a little uneasy. They sat in their seats and secretly sized up Mu Yaja's handsome side profile. Lingling carefully sized up Muyaja. In her heart, she was a little envious of Yu. Yu's father was so handsome. He sat expressionlessly on the wooden bench. His back was straight, and his whole body was cold and solemn. There was an indescribable aura around him, and he exuded the aura of a famous aristocrat. Even in such a shabby and backward setting, it was difficult to conceal his noble and cold aura. Li Ru looked at him and sighed in her heart. Indeed, one could not compare with another. Some people were blessed by the heavens. After Muyaja sat down, Lingling and Dowdu became much more restrained. He raised his hand slightly and took a sip of tea. Lingling was so scared that she didn't dare to move. She stared at him until he put down the teacup. Only then did she carefully take a sip of tea. Yun sure, and Yu also sat down. However, since Muyaja didn't say anything and didn't move his chopsticks, the others didn't dare to move. Yun sure glanced at everyone's expressions and knew that Muyaja's aura was too strong, causing them to tremble in fear. Hence, she said to Muyaja, "You seem to have scared the two children." The moment she spoke, it startled him. Muyaja was originally thinking about something, but after being reminded by Yun sure, he raised his head and looked at Li Ru and the two children on the table. He looked a little cautious. Yun sure smiled and said, "Sisterly, the three children are hungry. Don't just wait. Let's eat, or the dishes will get cold." Li Ru asked carefully, "Boss Mu seems to be dissatisfied with the dishes." "Ha! Is it because you're used to eating luxurious food and eating exotic delicacies that you can't find any dishes to your liking in this countryside?" Chapter 1295. No, he's not a picky eater. Don't judge him by his looks. He's always been like this. He doesn't like to talk and doesn't smile. After a pause, she said helplessly, "Look, big sister Li, there's so much food on the table. It'll be a waste if we can't finish it all." With that, Yun sure glared at Muyaja. Muyaja smiled and said, "Big sister Li, don't be so busy. Let the children eat. I was just distracted. I didn't mean anything else." With that, Muyaja picked up a drumstick for Lingling and Lil P. Then he picked up a few pieces of chicken and placed them in Yun sure and Yu's bowls. Li Ru was flattered by Muyaja calling her Big Sister Li. When she saw him put the drumsticks in Lingling and Lil P's bowls, she became even more nervous. She pinched the corner of her shirt and said nervously, "Boss Mu, can you give Yu one of these drumsticks?" Lingling stared at the drumstick in her bowl. Her mouth was gluttonous. Just as she was about to pick it up with her chopsticks and take a bite, Li Ru glared at her. She immediately stopped moving and pursed her lips in embarrassment. She knew that Li Ru wanted to save the drumstick for Yu. Yun sure smiled and tried to ease the atmosphere. "Big sister Li, what are you doing? Look at how scared the children are. If the children like drumsticks, let them have them." Yu doesn't like drumsticks." Yu quickly added, "Auntie, I really don't like drumsticks. Let Lingling have them." "That's right. Big sister Li, let's not be so polite. You treat us as family. If you're so polite, we'll feel uncomfortable," Yun sure said helplessly. Only then did Li Ru nod and let out a few simple and honest laughs. Muyaja interacted with Lingling and Lil P from time to time. Although his tone was cold, his gaze was gentler. Every time Lingling spoke to him, her face would turn red. "This uncle is so handsome." Especially those eyes. They were deep and mesmerizing, with long eyelashes. When he spoke, the corners of his eyes were slightly curved, revealing a playful and devilish charm, which really made her heart jump. Li Ru was even more flattered. She had heard from the villagers that the man's appearance today was very impressive. She then recalled what the man's assistant had said to them. He had even said that they would not have to worry about food and clothing for the rest of their lives. Then how powerful must this man be? He must be a big boss with a good net worth. Eating at the same table as the big boss, it was inevitable that she would feel reserved. Mu Yaja took a sip of the chicken soup. Li Ru had specially stewed chicken soup for Yu. The chicken soup tasted pretty good, so Mu Yaja scooped up another spoonful and sent it into Yu's mouth. He didn't forget to carefully blow on it and dip it in. When he was sure it was cold, he fed it to him. Yu drank a mouthful happily. Mu Yaja raised his eyebrows. Is it good? Yes, it's good. Auntie's cooking is amazing. Yu was not stingy with his praise. Li Ru blushed and tried to avoid it. Mu Yaja scooped up another spoonful of soup and fed it to Yu. Yun Shirshir looked at this scene and suddenly felt a little dazed. This was probably Mu Yaja's most charming moment. When he looked at Yu, the gentleness and adoration in his eyes were almost unconcealable. Chapter 12, 96. This man had always given her the impression that he was domineering and cold. However, at this moment, the sharpness and coldness of the past had faded from his body. When he looked at Yu, he lowered his head and the tenderness in his eyes was almost overflowing. When he smiled, he was really the most charming. His sexy thin lips were slightly curved into a mesmerizing curve. Ling Ling was extremely envious. She looked at him eagerly and suddenly felt a trace of disappointment in her heart. Suddenly, a tender little hand holding a pair of chopsticks picked up a piece of vegetable and placed it in her bowl. When she looked up, she saw Yu smiling and saying, "You can't just eat meat. You should eat more vegetables." His smile was so warm. It warmed her heart. Ling Ling nodded. Okay. At this moment, the outside of the Zhao family's house was filled with people. Many people were asking about the young couple's background. After dinner, they sat and chatted for a while before Mu Yaja decided to leave. Li Ru politely asked him to stay. "Don't you want to stay for a while longer?" Mu Yaja said, "I won't take up any more of your time." "It's not a problem at all. There's no such thing." Li Ru was still enthusiastic. "Sister Li, there's still a child waiting at home," Yun Shirshir said with a smile. After exchanging a few pleasantries with Li Ru nodded. Before leaving, she grabbed Yu and stuffed the envelope into his arms. "My dear child, I can't accept this much money. Give the money to your parents and tell them that I can't accept it." She was so simple and honest that when she took out the check from the envelope and saw that it was a few million, she was immediately shocked. She even felt that the envelope was so hot. In her entire life, she had never seen a fraction of the amount on the check. However, Yu pushed her hand back. "Auntie, just accept it. This is a small token of my appreciation. Just accept Daddy's goodwill. This, Auntie, thank you, but I'm also very sorry about what happened this time. However, since Uncle is no longer around, I will take on the responsibility of taking care of you." You said obediently. Li Ru's heart warmed, and she was touched. Tears welled up in her eyes, and her lips trembled, but she couldn't say anything in the end. When they left, Li Ru followed behind the car for some distance. Ling Ling followed beside her and kept waving at Yu. Yu leaned against the car window and looked out. She smiled and waved. Yu returned to her seat and hugged Yun Shirshir's arm. Satisfaction and anticipation appeared on her face. How wonderful! He was finally home. At that moment, it was as if a beam of sunlight had shone into her heart, bright and warm. When they got home, Xiao Yichen heard the sound of a car horn. He stood at the entrance of the villa and stood on his tiptoes to look around. The car came to a steady stop at the entrance. The moment Yu got out of the car, Mu Yichen saw him and immediately pounced on him excitedly, hugging him tightly in his arms. He hugged Yu so tightly as if he was afraid that he would lose a precious treasure again. He hugged Yu Yu tightly in his arms. Everything seemed so unreal, as if it was a dream. However, when he felt the real warmth from Yu Yu's body, Mu Yichen finally believed that it wasn't a dream. Yu Yu, you're home. I've been waiting for you. Mu Yichen felt guilty. He hadn't been able to lead the rescue team to the scene in time. Chapter 1297. Mu Yichen had always been strong. Even when he was seriously injured, he did not shed a single tear. However, when he held Yu Yu in his arms, Mu Yichen's eyes welled up. He could not help but tear up. From now on, let's not be separated anymore. Mu Yichen said solemnly. Yu was almost suffocated by his tight embrace. Brother, be gentler. You're hurting me. Yu said helplessly. Okay. Mu Yichen loosened his arms. Before Yu could catch his breath, Mu Yichen hugged him tightly again. Yu, I promise to protect you. It's all my fault that you're injured so badly this time. Brother, are you blaming me? You're hurting my wound, he reminded him weakly. Mu Yichen was shocked and quickly let go of him. Yu glanced at his flustered expression and could not help but burst out laughing. Mu Yichen's face froze, and he asked with a strange expression, What are you laughing at? Brother, I realize that you're so funny. Yu covered her mouth and giggled. What do you mean? It's so mushy, Yu said. Mu Yichen smacked his lips, and his heart turned cold. Yu touched his hair, helplessly. Good boy. Didn't I go home? Mu Yichen's face turned red strangely. However, he was greedy for the warmth of Yu's palm and smiled. Yun Shishir and Mu Yaja walked over. When they saw the affectionate look on the two little guys' faces, they looked at each other. Why are you so lovey-dovey? Yun Shishir couldn't help but tease. She felt gratified to see that the two little guys had such a good relationship. He could still remember how Yu had rejected Mu Yichen when the two of them had first met. They were not close to each other at all. Now that the relationship between the two brothers was so good, she felt a lot more relieved. Yu could only rub his forehead helplessly at her teasing. However, he heard Yun Shishir say, Xiao Yichen, you looked like a woman in ancient times who longed for her husband to come home. Mu Yaja added, The amethyst stone. Yun Shishir immediately agreed. Yes, the amethyst stone. Xiao Yichen didn't know what the rock was. Yu, who was standing at the side, understood. Her face froze for a moment, and she said, angrily, Mommy! He pouted and pretended to be angry. Xiao Yichen didn't understand. Yu, what does Mommy mean by the amethyst stone? Yu said seriously, You don't understand. Don't ask. Mu Yichen pouted dejectedly. Yun Shishir was even more amused. She went forward and hugged the two children. These two babies were so funny. She secretly laughed in her heart and couldn't help but reach out to scratch Mu Yichen's nose. Yu and Mu Yichen looked at each other and smiled. When they got home, Yun Shishir specially cooked a sumptuous dinner for the two children. She hadn't cooked for a long time, so her culinary skills were a little rusty. Naturally, she couldn't compare to Yu's culinary skills. However, she put in a lot of effort, and the taste was not bad. Compared to before, her culinary skills had improved. Mu Yichen was full of expectations for Yun Shishir's culinary skills. When the dishes were served on the table, he couldn't wait to taste them. Then, he raised his eyebrows in approval. Mommy's culinary skills are amazing. Really? Then eat more. Yun Shishir was encouraged. Mu Yaja, who was standing at the side, didn't hold back and said, It's just passable. Chapter 1298. Upon hearing that, Yu crossed his arms in dissatisfaction and glared at him. Daddy, I'll give you another chance to reevaluate this. The threat in his eyes was indescribable. Mu Yaja replied without batting an eyelid. It's not bad. Yun, sure. Mui Chen, Yu felt much better upon hearing that, and his expression softened a little. He held the bowl in his hands. The rice in the bowl was warm and tasty. He suddenly felt that this happiness was not easy to come by. It was probably because he had gone through hardships that he knew how precious a peaceful happiness was. After dinner, Mu Yichen pulled Yu to his room. He had a lot of questions to ask him. Yu gave him a brief overview of what had happened in the past 2 days. Mu Yichen, on the other hand, was shocked by what he heard. When he learned that Mu Lianjue had sent people to hunt him down, he clenched his fists in anger. That Mu Lianjue is too despicable. He's just like a clown. He probably knows that he's lost, so he needs to jump around a little before he can feel at ease. You snorted coldly. D*MN. Mu Yichen was so angry that he was at a loss for words. He could not wait to tear him into pieces with his own hands. You dialed Li Hanlin's number. When the call got through, the latter thanked the heavens and expressed his relief when he learned that he had returned home. Director Yun, you're back. I was so worried. Li Hanlin was really scared out of his wits by what had happened to him. Yu replied faintly, I've troubled you with a lot of things during my absence. Director Yun, these are all part of my job. There's no trouble at all. After a pause, Li Hanlin probed cautiously. Director Yun, is it convenient for you to make a trip to the office now? Why? There's something urgent waiting for you to settle. It's not convenient for me now. Ugh, you frowned slightly, judging from Li Hanlin's tone. It seemed like there was indeed something important. He thought for a moment and decided to make a trip to the company. Hence, he went to look for Mu Yaja and bluntly explained the reason. Daddy, I'm going to the company. I need you to cover for me, okay? He asked. Mu Yaja frowned. You've just returned home and you're still injured. What are you planning to do? Something important. You emphasized. But I don't want Mommy to know about my identity for the time being. So, if necessary, I need you to cover for me. Mu Yaja pondered for a moment. All right, I'll send you to the entrance of the company, but it can't take too long. All right. Hence, Mu Yaja covered up for Yu. He said that the child had returned and was craving for desserts from the famous shop in the city center. Yun sure wanted to go with him. However, Mu Yaja asked her to stay at home and accompany Xiao Yichen. Xiao Yichen was still injured and needed to rest. He could not move around too much, so Yun sure agreed. Mu Yaja successfully covered for him and sent him to Leji's headquarters. Yu asked him to wait for him outside the company and to call him when he arrived. Mu Yaja smiled and teased, Can I enter your company, Director Yun? Of course. After all, there are some business secrets that I can't let you know. Yu pretended to be arrogant and crossed his arms. Mu Yaja ruffled his hair. Go ahead, I'll wait for your call. Okay. Chapter 1299. As soon as Yu entered the office, he saw Gong Jie standing in front of the window. He was wearing a snow-white military suit, which made him look tall and slender. He stood in front of the window expressionlessly with a cigar in his hand. He seemed to have been waiting for him for a long time. Li Hanlin saw him and went up to him. President Yun, you're here. Yes, what's the matter? Yu asked. Li Hanlin raised his head with a complicated expression and looked in the direction of Gong Jie. Yu followed his line of sight and looked at Gong Jie. He asked in a deep voice, Young Master Gong, you're looking for me? Gong Jie turned around, but his face was gloomy. He looked at Yu with a pair of deep, unfathomable eyes. You're back. Yes. Yu smiled and sat down on the sofa. Young Master Gong, your subordinates made a lot of mistakes in this operation. Gong Jie's expression changed. They weren't careful enough and made some mistakes. I suffered a little. Tell me, how are you going to compensate me? Gong Jie asked, how do you want me to compensate you? Assign that vermilion bird of yours to me. The moment the boy opened his mouth, he laid out a shocking condition. Zhu Ke. The man tugged at his lips and asked nonchalantly, why? Have you taken a liking to her? Yes, you said bluntly. Other than her, give me another secret guard. What do you think of this condition? He had a motive for making such a request. With Lisa by his side, his safety was guaranteed. However, he had to find a way to arrange a secret guard to protect his mommy when necessary. After all, he didn't want something like this to happen a second time. The mercenaries of Mercenary Paradise were of high quality. Ordinary soldiers from the army couldn't compare to them. They were all assassins who walked in the dark and had outstanding martial arts skills. Naturally, he couldn't be at ease with them protecting his mommy. Therefore, he proposed such a condition to Gong Jie. Gong Jie smiled. Regarding his request, he was straightforward. Since you asked me for the person, I have no reason to refuse. From now on, Vermilion Bird and Njia will be at your disposal. All right. After a pause, Yu asked, where's Lisa? Gong Jie said, are you concerned about her? Ask her about her situation. Gong Jie's lips curled into a cold smile. He said expressionlessly, she's just a bodyguard. Even if she's dead, you don't have to ask anything. She died, Gong Jie said coldly. Not dead. It's just a small injury. It won't take her life. Yu frowned. Why are you looking for me? Gong Jie raised his eyebrows and suddenly walked to the poster. His gaze fell on the poster hanging on the wall. His thin lips escaped from his thin lips. Who is this woman? Yu was shocked. His gaze fell on the poster as well. It was the poster he had chosen when Yun Shishir was filming. He felt that this poster was especially beautiful and elegant. Just looking at it was pleasing to the eye. Therefore, he chose this poster and enlarged it to make it into a poster. He hung it on the wall, facing his desk. When he raised his head, he happened to be able to see this pictorial, which made him feel at ease. When he heard Gong Jie's question, he became suspicious. He frowned slightly and was a little wary. Why are you asking about this? I'm just asking. Chapter 1300. He stared at Yu for a long time before slowly approaching him and squatting down in front of him. His gaze never left Yu's small face. His facial features and eyes were very similar to the woman in the poster. He had his suspicions when he first saw Yu. However, thinking that it might just be a coincidence, he did not think too much about it. It was only when he saw the huge poster hanging on the wall in Yun Tianyo's office that he became suspicious. The woman in the poster had such similar facial features and gentle eyes. It was as if they were the same as the shadow in his memory. This woman and the little lad should have some sort of relationship. If not, why would he hang this woman's poster in his office? What was more suspicious was that the little lad's facial features were very similar to this woman's. They looked like mother and son. Could it be that this woman was his? Gong Jie was so agitated that his shoulders and fingertips could not help but tremble. He suddenly held Yu's face and caressed every inch of his face with his slender fingers. A complicated look appeared on his face. Actually, when I first met you, I vaguely suspected your identity. Gong Jie said this firmly. He slowly raised his eyes and met Yun Tianyo's startled gaze. What suspicion? Don't you think that you and I look alike? Gong Jie raised a brow and his thin lips parted as he asked this. Yu's gaze landed on his face again. It was more than similar. Yu was extremely sensitive. Hence, when he first met Gong Jie, he had some suspicions. However, at that time, he was thinking about his mommy's matter and did not think much about it. He heard that his mommy had a younger brother who was in a car accident and disappeared without a trace. No one knew if he was dead or alive. Now, the man standing in front of him looked so similar to his mommy. It was hard for you not to think about it. However, compared to Gong Jia, his attitude was more conservative. Indeed, there are some similarities, but what are you trying to say? He did not go straight to the point and tell him the identity of the person in the poster. His mommy's identity was sensitive. Moreover, the man standing in front of him was a core member of the Hurricane Group, the #1 mercenary empire. He was a very dangerous person. What if he was not? Without confirmation, he would not reveal his mommy's identity to him or anyone else. This was his protective measure. For his mommy, Gong Jia sized him up. With him, he was eager to verify, but he was afraid of being disappointed again. However, with a little bit of hope in his heart, he casually said, "I'm looking for someone." Yu was slightly taken aback. A woman. At the mention of this person, there was a rare tenderness in his usually cold and unruly eyes. "Although I don't know if I'll be able to find her in this lifetime, I don't want to give up on any hope, regardless of whether she's dead or alive. She is very important to me." Woman? You asked tentatively. Chapter 1301. Although someone told me that she's already dead, I don't believe it. There seemed to be a faint bond between bloodlines. Some people said that blood was thicker than water. Twins would form a bond similar to telepathy. Back then, he was told that his sister had died in a car accident. By the time he woke up, he was already taken away by the Hurricane Group. That was the first time he met his biological father, Gong Shaoying. His father told him that when the people from the Hurricane Group took him away from the hospital, his sister had already been declared dead. The doctor said that she showed signs of dying on the way to the hospital. Her heartbeat was already gone by the time they reached the hospital. They did a series of emergency treatments, but it was too late. Gong Jia could not believe it and was downcast for a while. His sixth sense was telling him that his sister was still alive. He had also met a woman who looked like him. However, after further verification, the final result was disappointing. Gradually, he began to believe that his sister was no longer in this world. However, when he saw the huge poster in Yun Tianyou's office, his heart seemed to have sensed something and was filled with hope again. Yu was silent for a while before he made up his mind and slowly explained, "The woman in the poster is a celebrity." "Celebrity?" Gong Jia was stunned. "What's your relationship with her?" If you must ask what kind of relationship they have, Yu's face instantly revealed a fanboy's expression. "I'm her little fan." Gong Jia was silent. Li Hanlin, who was standing at the side, was speechless. "Just a fan? That's all." Gong Jia stared at him suspiciously. Yu gave him an elegant smile, hiding his thoughts well. "If the person you're looking for is her, I can use my connections to investigate her identity for you." Gong Jia coldly said, "No need." If that was the case, he would send someone to investigate. With that, he stood up abruptly and strode off. Yu watched him leave expressionlessly with a frown. "Agent Li," he called out. Li Hanlin walked to his side and squatted slightly. "Director Yun, what are your orders?" "Lock down everything. Don't let him find out anything about my mommy." "Why?" Li Hanlin was suddenly suspicious. "Why do you want to hide her identity from young Master Gong?" Yu faintly answered, "Because before I can confirm his relationship with my mommy, I won't let him get close to her." "I don't understand your intention." Yu squinted at him. "Understood. But if it's proven that my mommy is the person he's been looking for, then it's a different story." Li Hanlin was curious. "How do you prove it?" You turned around with a smile on his face. He looked at Lee Hanlon and suddenly raised his hand. Between his fingers was a strand of silver hair. This was what he had stolen from the man's head while the latter was in a daze earlier. Take it and do a DNA paternity test. Let me know when the results are out. Yes. Chapter 1302. When Mu Yaja and Yu Yu returned home, Xiao Yichen was already asleep. Yun Shirshir was in the flower bed, holding a pair of scissors in one hand as she trimmed the flowers. The sky was gradually turning dark. In the evening, she was half squatting by the flower bed. She held the flower bed with one hand and gently fiddled with it, trimming away the sparse branches from time to time. The injuries on her body had not healed yet. The corners of her lips were a little disfigured, but she was pursing her thin lips. Apart from being serious, her clear and beautiful face shone with a jade-like radiance. It was as if everything had been peaceful over the years. Most of the time, this woman was as beautiful as a flower, but her beauty was not ostentatious. Most of the time, she breathed quietly and lived quietly. She was so quiet that she was like a cat that had restrained its claws and arrogance. She was quietly nestled in a corner, as if she was aloof from worldly affairs. In her tranquility, she had restrained all her sharpness. Mu Yaja leaned against the door and watched her silently. She did not seem to notice his presence and was focused on studying the flowers. Mu Yaja slowly walked toward her. Yun Shirshir suddenly sensed the footsteps behind her. She looked up and saw Mu Yaja hugging her waist from behind. His movements were very gentle as he pulled her into his embrace. Caught off guard, the scissors fell to the ground. Yu Yu stood at the door and watched for a while. The corners of his lips curled into a gentle smile before he walked away quietly. Yun Shirshir was a little shocked by his sudden appearance. She looked up and could not help but glare at him angrily. You only know how to scare people. She glared at him with some dissatisfaction. She bit her lip and suddenly smiled gently. Even her eyes were like water, making his heart skip a beat. Mu Yaja could not help but lower his head and give her a light peck. In this beautiful flower bed, the faint fragrance in the air captured her sweet breath. Amidst the beautiful flowers, he held her gently in his arms. His large palm gently caressed her face and rubbed her eyelids. Mu Yaja lowered his eyes and looked at her. As he narrowed his eyes, his thick and long eyelashes fell into her eyes. The poignant night gave birth to some warmth and charm. He caressed her face and began to kiss her gently. His thin lips were pressed tightly against her tender red mouth, gently rubbing against it. However, he was not in a hurry to enter. Instead, he lingered on her pink lips more often. The soft texture, like a jelly, made him a little lost in this gentle whirlpool. He kissed her even more deeply and with more strength. The woman in his arms was like a budding rose, slowly blooming. A beautiful fragrance could be smelled with a light sniff. His slender fingers lifted a strand of her hair. He closed his eyes and pushed the kiss even deeper. Yun Shirshir was a little nervous. In a low voice, she muttered, "Don't, the children are here." If the two children saw this intimate scene, she would feel quite embarrassed. Mu Yaja harumphed. The children are tired. They're all asleep. He hugged her body with his hand and started to touch her body gently. Then he could not help but harumph. Why have you lost weight again? She had lost so much weight. During the few days in the hospital, she ate very little. Moreover, this woman seemed to have a thin physique. No matter how much she was fed, it was hard for her to gain more than a few pounds. But the speed at which she lost weight was very fast. He was a little dissatisfied. This woman was too thin. It was not good. Chapter 1303. Yun sure pouted and felt a little wronged. I've lost a little weight these days, but it's just as well. I won't have to lose weight when I'm filming a new drama soon. The camera would always magnify a person's size. Therefore, many celebrities would starve a few meals a few days before they went on screen to maintain their beautiful image in front of the camera. When she was filming The Green Apple, she gained a few kilograms for a few days. Chinjo ordered her to go on a diet and forced her to lose 3 kilograms in 2 days. Only then would she look good on screen. Muyaja was displeased. You don't have to lose weight. Gain some weight, and your figure will be just right. But with my physique, I don't seem to be more than 50 kilograms when I was at my fattest, Yun sure said gloomily. With her height of 165 meters, 50 kilograms could only be considered just right. Now, she was only slightly more than 90 kilograms. She was indeed a little too thin. Muyaja couldn't help but pinch her face a little harder. Yun sure slapped his hand away. It hurts. As soon as she said that, she yawned and felt sleepy. She seemed to be a little sleepy. Sleepy? He frowned and asked. Yun sure nodded. Then, let's sleep together. Yun sure nodded. However, in the next second, she was lifted up by Muyaja. Before she could react, she was carried in his arms like a princess. Muyaja looked at the woman in his arms and smiled elegantly. My wife, it's late. It's time to rest. Yun sure pursed her lips and smiled. She couldn't help but say, Who's your wife? She widened her eyes, which were full of anger. Her charming eyes were like silk, and her innocent look was extremely seductive. He couldn't help but lower his head and cover her lips again. He was reluctant to part with her. This time, she didn't dodge. Instead, she met his warm kiss head-on. She naturally wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him slowly. She mischievously used the tip of her tongue to trace the seam of his lips. Muyaja opened his mouth and sucked in a wisp of her spiritual fragrance. As they intertwined, his body gradually reacted. Yun sure smiled playfully. Unexpectedly, she reached out her hand and gently touched a certain sensitive area on his body. Then she pulled it away. She bit her lip and smiled. In her smile, there was a bit of slyness, a bit of charm, and a bit of playfulness. A strange shade of red flashed across Muyaja's face. He looked up and glared at her. How dare this woman provoke him? If she did that, she would easily get into trouble. He suspected that her actions were a silent invitation to him. Muyaja narrowed his eyes and bit her earlobe gently as a punishment. He whispered into her ear, Woman, are you playing with fire? In a way, this was also a form of initiative. A hint of panic flashed through Yun sure's eyes, and then she stammered, No. Then what were you doing? Yun sure was a little shy under his teasing gaze. Just now, she had only done it on a whim. Now, she was a little regretful. She covered her face in shame and stammered, I just wanted to test if your shaft was hard or not. She was acting shy. Muyaja smiled wickedly. Sometimes this woman could be quite adorable. He lowered his voice and bit her ear. If you want a test, you can't test it like this. Chapter 1304. Yun sure peeked at him through the gaps between her fingers and covered her face in embarrassment. She felt a little embarrassing. Muyaja didn't know whether to laugh or cry at first. Then, he carried her back to the bedroom and carefully placed her on the bed. Concerned about the wounds on her body that hadn't healed yet, his movements were very careful, as if he was treating a precious and fragile object. In the next second, he took off her clothes. Yun sure immediately reached out to stop him. He said in a low voice, Don't move. She really didn't dare to move. until he took off her outerwear, leaving only her cute and sexy underwear. Then, his tall body pressed down on her. He placed it on her body, but deliberately lightened the weight. Even so, Yun Shirshir still pushed him away in embarrassment. Ugh, Mu Yaja, you're so heavy, a height of 188 meters, and a weight of more than 70 kilograms was a very heavy weight to her. Mu Yaja smiled mischievously. Then he reached out and hugged her. With a flip of his body, he switched positions with her and helped her sit on top of him. With this, Yun Shirshir sat on top of him in a seductive position. Yun Shirshir smiled sweetly. With a slight twist of her body, the straps on her bright and beautiful body slid down from her shoulders. When her clothes were half removed, that beautiful scene came into his view. Mu Yaja reached out and just happened to be able to grasp that pair of plump jade bunnies. Yun Shirshir sensitively reached out and grabbed his hand. Then he held her hand in reverse and guided it to a certain spot. The moment her fingertips touched something hot, she was shocked and immediately retracted her hand. Why? Who was the one who said that she wanted to try it? He grabbed her hand again and smiled mischievously. His deep eyes revealed some hidden meaning. You weren't at your best just now. Now try it again. How does it feel? Those words really made one's heart skip a beat. She blushed at his teasing. She pursed her lips in shyness as her cheeks blushed a few shades of pink. It was just a teasing remark. Did he actually take it seriously? She was only joking. That's why she said that. No matter how bold she was, she wouldn't dare to play with fire on him. Hey, you're not allowed to go overboard. She mumbled softly as a warning to him. However, the man didn't think much of it and looked at her leisurely like an ancient overlord. He asked her casually, "Who's the one who's going overboard?" "It's you." She slapped his hand away and chuckled. "Let go of me." But her face. He grabbed her chin, forcing her to meet his gaze, and snorted in displeasure. "You're the one who provoked me first. I didn't want to touch you during this period of time, but now you're in the wrong. Now that you're the one who started it, shouldn't you be responsible for extinguishing it?" Yun Shirshir pouted disapprovingly and raised her eyebrows. "Humph, it's more like I'm the one who's going to destroy you." "Destroy me? This woman. She's got guts. She actually wanted to destroy him." Mu Yaja curled his lips and kissed her perky, but he needed it gently. This feeling was just right, but it made his brows relax slightly. He wanted to see who would be the one to destroy who. "Sure, why don't you give it a try?" Chapter 1305. Yun Shirshir reached out to grab his careless hand. With a charming smile on her face, she looked like a seductive vixen. What greeted his eyes was a seductive scene. "All right, stop fooling around. Sleep with me, okay?" She leaned over and laid on his body, hugging his shoulders and acting coquettishly. She was a little tired and wanted to rest. Unfortunately, his restless hands continued to roam all over her body, igniting a fire. It caused her body to react a little. Yun Shirshir became increasingly frustrated and couldn't help pinching his face. Mu Yaja took a step further and asked, "How are we going to sleep?" "Hey!" Yun Shirshir glared at him and rebuked, "Mu Yaja, can you be more serious?" However, the man hooked his arm around her jade-like neck and rubbed his lips against her ear. "Am I not serious enough? How do you want me to be serious? Then, tell me, sleep with me obediently." Yun Shirshir pressed his restless hand down and said, "Today, I really can't." The man raised a brow meaningfully as if he was deliberately teasing her. "Why can't I?" Yun Shirshir was stunned. Seeing him chuckle softly as if he was teasing her, she instantly blushed. What a meaningful question. She pouted softly and coquettishly. "I was wrong. I shouldn't have ignited the fire. Spare me, okay? If you want me to spare you, sure. Mu Yaja pinched her cheeks and said seductively, say something nice. Call her something nice. Yun Shirshir racked her brains. Yaja, it doesn't sound nice, she said softly again. The man snorted. It doesn't sound nice. Yun Shirshir's face fell. She looked at him with some frustration and pursed her lips. For a moment, she didn't know what he wanted to hear. My dear husband, no, not today. Why not? I won't give you another chance if you can't call out something nice. He snorted coldly and grabbed her by the throat. Then he reached his hand between her legs. Yun Shirshir cried out in surprise. She dodged sensitively and grabbed his hand in a panic. She kissed his chiseled jaw and rubbed it intimately. My lord husband, she gently called out. Her eyes were as gentle as water, and her gaze moved. The softest part of his heart was ruthlessly and accurately struck. In an instant, one side collapsed. Are you satisfied? She wrapped her arms around his shoulders as a flattering smile appeared on her face. Tonight, I'll let you off. When he opened his mouth, it was an extra-legal benevolence. Yun Shirshir cupped his handsome face and kissed it. He hugged her and placed her on the bed. Then he kissed her forehead and said, I'll take a shower first. You sleep first. I haven't showered either. Together? No. Her face heated up, and she rejected him on the spot. Wouldn't she be digging her own grave if she took a shower with him? Otherwise, when she wiped the gun and caught fire, the shower would become an impure one. This man was full of energy as if he never knew fatigue. However, she was really tired. Once her head hit the pillow, sleepiness overwhelmed her, and she fell asleep in the next second. Then you go shower first. He patted her, and ordered her to take a shower first. Chapter 1306. It looked like she had really put in a lot of effort to guard against him. Mu Yaja curled his lips and smiled. He found it interesting. Finally, when he came out of the shower, this little woman was lying quietly on the bed, lazily resting her head on her arm. She had already fallen asleep. He got off the bed, gently. First, he propped himself up, glanced at her, then reached out and pulled her into his embrace. She occupied his entire body. Hugging her, he lowered his head to look at her lazy and charming posture as she slept. Only then did the man smile comfortably. Only when he hugged her, the feeling that she belonged to him felt more real. Mu Yaja reached out his fingers with interest and gently caressed her soft and smooth cheeks. His long fingers gently circled her silky black hair a few times, twirling it around his fingertips. He played with it, but no matter how much he played, he couldn't get enough of it. He lowered his head and gently kissed her face. You're mine. He leaned against her ear and said these words in a deep voice. In her sleep, she seemed to be a little disturbed. She lazily reached out her hand to brush it away, but he held it with one hand. He looked deeply at her. Just looking at her sleeping face like this gave him an inexplicable sense of satisfaction. This was probably what he meant by having it, to be able to hug her to sleep and to be able to see her sleepy face when she woke up. This kind of lifestyle was something he had never imagined. It was a little unreal, but now it was happening right in front of him. This gave him a deep and powerful sense of belonging. She belonged to him, and he belonged to her too. He stretched out his arm and let her rest her head on it. He also laid down and hugged her waist. Just like that, they fell into a dream together. The next day, when Yun Shirshir woke up, it was already morning. She didn't know when, but the side of the bed was empty. He left without a sound. Yun Shirshir's heart suddenly felt empty. When she completely woke up from her hazy sleep, she realized that he must have gone to the office. She got up walked to the window, and pulled open the curtains. The sun was shining brightly outside. Today was a good day, with blue skies and white clouds. The capital had not seen such clear weather in a long time. Along with it, her mood after waking up earlier had also become much brighter. Yun Shirshir entered the bathroom. After washing up, she walked out of the room and saw Yu walking out with a basket of clean clothes. Yu looked at her, smiled slightly, and his eyes softened. "Mommy, you woke up so early?" "Yes. Daddy left early in the morning. He must have gone to the company." Yun Shirshir nodded and suddenly glared at him. Yun Shirshir looked at the clothes basket in his hand with some astonishment. "Washing clothes?" Yu explained. I woke up early today and had nothing to do, so I washed the clothes. Right now, I'm planning to go out and